We've got to wait for the stream to fire up all across the fruited plains of the internet. Let's make sure that things are alive and well. We're checking in on Facebook. Looks like we're alive there. We've got Twitch, which is always booting up a little bit. Let's make sure that YouTube looks like it's rocking and rolling. Our secret, unlisted cabal of, watchers out there. All right, well, it looks like we're warming up over here. Come on. Now there's Twitch, which means we can go ahead and get started, can't we? It's Monday, folks. Give me a second. All right, let's get started. Hello, my friends, and welcome back to yet another episode of Watching the Watchers Live. My name is Robert Gruler. I am a criminal defense attorney here at the R&R Law Group in the always beautiful and sunny Scottsdale, Arizona, where my team and I, over the course of many years, have represented thousands of good people facing criminal charges. And throughout our time in practice, we have seen a lot of problems with our justice system. I'm talking about misconduct involving the police. We've got prosecutors behaving poorly. We have judges not particularly interested in a little thing called justice. And it all starts with the politicians, the people at the top, the ones who write the rules and pass the laws that they expect you and me to follow, but sometimes have a little bit of difficulty doing so themselves. That's why we started this show called Watching the Watchers, so that together with your help, we can shine that big, beautiful spotlight of accountability and transparency down upon our system with the hope of finding justice. And we're grateful that you are here and with us today. We've got a lot to get into in this episode of Watching the Watchers. We're going to be talking about the Kyle Rittenhouse case. He was back in court today. The government's turn this afternoon to present their expert witness that is going to be testifying about use of force and other permutations about what went on in Kenosha back in Wisconsin in 2020. And it was a very interesting court date. I've got several clips of this. Turns out that expert witness that the government was going to be calling may not even be used anymore. And so we're going to take a look at some of the motions in limine, some of the arguments that they're having about jury instructions, because trial is right around the corner. We're also going to be talking about Alec Baldwin. Alec Baldwin, of course, was in the shooting, shot and killed a person. And now a lot of people are sort of pointing fingers all over the place. The blame game has started. And we're going to take a look at two people who were on set that may be responsible for this. In particular, an armorer, a young 24-year-old gal who I believe this was only her second movie that she's ever worked on. And then an assistant director who may have actually handed Alec Baldwin the gun. And so we've got a lot of different sort of finger pointing happening and different potential suspects that may be a part of the investigation. We have some insight into what some of the warrant language sounds like, because although I don't have a copy of the warrant today, a lot of this has been leaked out to the media. And even though the public documents are not public yet, or they're not available yet, we are getting a hint about what really went happen on the set of Rust. And then in our first segment, we're going to go in reverse order today. We're talking about the January 6th Select Committee, and we're talking about this new Rolling Stone article that claims that they have some inside baseball, that they have somebody who is a MAGA supporter, or two individuals actually, corroborated by a third person, that were coordinating the January 6th insurrection. You remember the day that America almost evaporated right before your very eyes. They were communicating with allegedly some of Trump's inner circle, people like Mark Meadows and other Congress people like Paul Gosar here in Arizona, shout out, and also Marjorie Taylor Greene. So we're going to get into that story and a lot more. This is being recorded as a live stream, and so if you want to be a part of the show when we record, that takes place over at watchingthewatchers.locals.com, and we take questions at the end of every segment. So if you want to participate in that, here's a form if you are over there at watchingthewatchers.locals.com. And of course, if you are watching this on replay, we'd love to hear your comments, your thoughts in the comments down below. If you're looking for clips of the live show, this all is available over on the Robert Gruler ESQ Clips channel, which is growing nicely. Thank you for your support. That's a really good place for you to share in any one of these different segments. I know it's a long hour and a half or so show, and so sometimes you just want to send a family member the good stuff, and you can just go over to the Clips channel, send that over to them. All right, and so without any further ado, let's go ahead and get into the news of the day. the January 6th Select Committee is still driving this train forward, or beating the horse to death, or whatever analogy you want to use, but they are not letting up. Benny Thompson and other people who were part of the Select Committee were making the airwaves ring over the weekend. On Sunday, Benny Thompson was on Face the Nation talking about what the Select Committee is intending to do here. And remember, this is sort of another committee that was created. It's allegedly bipartisan. It's comprised of mostly Democrats, with Liz Cheney, Adam Kinzinger, and I think some other, technical Republican. And so they've been investigating the January 6th event for about 10 months now, because we already had an impeachment. We have a number of criminal proceedings taking place with all of the individual defendants, the individual people who were charged with trespass, essentially, is what it comes down to. But not to let a horse not be beaten to death. Benny Thompson was out. And so we're going to listen to see what he has to say on This Is Face the Nation on CBS. And then we're going to jump into this Rolling Stone article that also came out and is hinting that there are some very, very, curious witnesses that have made contact with this January 6th Select Committee, people that have inside baseball, that they know what Donald Trump was orchestrating, along with Mark Meadows and some other people in the secret cabal. And so we're going to break all of that down and see what the Select Committee ultimately intends to do. Where are they going with this? Are they going to indict anybody from Donald Trump's team? Is Steve Bannon going to ultimately be indicted? Well, we're going to see what the January 6th Select Committee says about it and what they hope to get out of this. So let's start at the top. Here is Benny Thompson on Face the Nation over the weekend, talking about really going after the funding. They really want to dive into where the money is. Where is it going? Here is Mr. Thompson.
You said this week you want to know who financed the march, who chartered the buses, who chartered the airplanes that day. Do you have any of the questions regarding the finances yet?
Yes, we do. We have one of the teams on the committee whose sole purpose is to look at the financing of January 6th. The people who spent money, whether it's their money or other folks' money, it really doesn't matter, but we want that to go to the work product of the committee. We think the potential for commingling restricted funds for this purpose might be there, but obviously we'll look at it. It's just interesting to note that a lot of people came to Washington by bus, by plane, by chartered vehicles. They stayed in hotels, motels, all of that. Somebody had to pay for it. And we want to look at whether or not the paying for that participation was legal and whether or not it contributed to what occurred on January 6th.
Yeah, so what you can see what they want to do, of course, is if they can crack sort of the shell, then maybe they can get to additional layers. We're going to hear another committee member talk about different layers in this whole thing. And so right now, a lot of what you see with these prosecutions are, the low-level protesters. They're the people who were there. They're the people who were carrying the signs and actually physically present at the Capitol that day. But what about all those other Republicans out there, all of those other Trump supporters that maybe weren't there but financed it? Because if we're going to be waging war on our political enemies, we got to go after everybody else. We just can't, go after the soldiers, the foot soldiers in the insurrection. We have to go and weed out the rest of the insurrectionists wherever they may be hiding in their little disgusting caves, those anti-democratic villains. And so they're going to then use the gigantic weight of the federal government to go and peer into people's bank accounts and see where transactions have been, moving from one area to another. And the Inquisition will never stop. So you can just brace yourself for that. Adam Schiff has made the same arguments that they're going to be, probably asking for warrants or whatever to get into people's bank accounts to see who it was funded. Then they can go after the Koch brothers or the Koch brothers or whatever their name is. They can go after the billionaire who funds Veritas, whatever her name was, because all of those people are now part of the enemy. And so it's turning into the financial world, because there's a lot more people that they can go after there. Now, another very interesting article came out. We talked about this earlier this morning. We had a locals only live stream this morning, and chairman of the board recommended this article, and I've seen it posted all over the place on Twitter and elsewhere. People are very excited about this, especially if you are a anti-Trumper, if you're somebody who thought that America almost ended on January 6th, you're looking at this article and you're saying, oh my goodness, finally some vindication in America. People are going to come to justice now because the Rolling Stone has undercover sources. They have an exclusive. They posted this over the weekend, October 24th, says that January 6 protest organizers say they participated in dozens of planning meetings with members of Congress and White House staff. Oh my goodness. That is just a shocking, I say, title, headline. You can see that actual organizers from the rally were actually coordinating with people who were part of the federal government. What a shocking article. I can't even think of a word to better describe this. It says, as the House investigation into January 6th attack heats up, some of the planners of the pro-Trump rallies that happened in Washington had begun communicating with congressional investigators, meaning the January 6th Select Committee, sharing new information about what really happened there. Two of these people have also spoken to Rolling Stone extensively about these new explosive allegations that multiple members of Congress were intimately involved in planning both Trump's effort to overturn his election loss and the January 6th events that turned violent. And so you can see anytime we're going to get into these articles, right, we have a lot of just really, really sloppy language that you can just see, right? Trump's effort to overturn his election loss. It's like, okay, well, that's a very loose definition because that can include a ton of people. That can include lawyers. That can include campaign activists. That can include people who were, on the ground doing audits and recounts. Anybody who just said, maybe we should double check some of these things, right? If they're trying to do anything that might reverse the election or battle on behalf of Donald Trump, that's not an illegal thing. That's not an insurrection. You're allowed to do those things. You're allowed to fight to overturn an election, right? Didn't Al Gore do that? Wasn't Hillary Clinton complaining about that? Stacey Abrams complains about it. Every single politician complains about it when they lose. Oh, it was not fair. It was rigged. I'm not really a terrible candidate or a horrible person. I'm just, I got rigged. This whole thing was stripped out from under me. It was all rigged. So this happens all the time. And they say that they're sort of conflating one argument with another. If Donald Trump was trying to overturn the election, that may be true. That doesn't necessarily mean it was illegal. If Donald Trump is trying to seize the podium of Congress and install a new dictatorship, that's a whole separate issue, but I haven't seen any evidence to that. So by sort of putting it in one bucket and then labeling them all the same things, you're not doing justice to actually distinguish one argument from the other. All right, and so let's get into the rest of this article. We can see here that the Rolling Stone says that they have separately confirmed there's a third person involved in the main January 6th rally that has communicated with the committee. Nice. This is the first report that the committee is hearing major new allegations from potential cooperating witnesses. While there have been prior indications that members of Congress were involved, this is the first account detailing its purported role and scope. Two sources claim they interact with Trump's team, including Chief of Staff Mark Meadows, wow, who they describe as having had the opportunity to prevent the violence. So again, it's like, well, how? In what way? In what shape, way, manner, form? In what capacity? Yeah, because he's the White House Chief of Staff. I suppose if he had, convinced Donald Trump to not be there on January 6th, maybe none of it would have happened. You're right? He could have prevented violence. But how far removed from the chain of causality are we talking about here? Who knows? But he could have prevented the violence. So they're sort of indicting the man for not doing something. It's sort of trying to prove a negative to some degree. The two sources, both of whom have been granted anonymity. Don't you just love that? So we have all this juicy information, all this information that these two individuals are going to be able to communicate to us. Finally, some answers, America. And I would love some answers, honestly. If these people have, text messages from Mark Meadows to Donald Trump, and Donald Trump says, authorize the insurrection, get that podium. And Mark Meadows goes, yes, sir, we're on it. And then he communicates that over to the cabal of MAGA insurrectionists around the country, and they just siege the Capitol like a virus conquering democracy, right? If that happened, I would love to know about it. Truth. I mean that dead seriously. I would love to see it. If there's any actual evidence here, I would love to see it. But I just haven't seen it yet. Somebody please provide it to me. And so we're getting very excited about this. And suddenly, they're anonymous. They've been granted anonymity due to ongoing investigations. Yes, we know. Yes, we know there's an ongoing investigation. It's been going on for 10 months, going to be 11 months here soon. So we know it's an investigation. You've already done an entire impeachment. You have this another fake select committee. You have the FBI literally dragging their feet at the U.S. Attorney's Office, making disclosure to hundreds of people who are being charged in criminal proceedings as Capitol Hill prisoners, defendants. And we're still doing this. We're still here. Okay. So nothing. So as far as I'm concerned, nothing at this point. They say that they were granted anonymity. They were describing participating in dozens of planning briefings. So again, what the hell does that mean? A planning briefing. Is that like, oh, we're going to go, march around the Capitol with some signs? Or does this mean that you're going to be the new Secretary of Defense when we take control of the Capitol building? You're Secretary of Defense. Your Treasury, you get labor, you get education. No, you don't get education. You get education. What are they talking about? I don't know. But neither does the Rolling Stone, apparently. So they say, I remember Marjorie Taylor Greene specifically talking to a dozen other members at one point or another, or their staffs, which again, does that make it illegal? You're allowed to talk about what happened at elections. You're allowed to organize and create groups to file lawsuits and to contest elections. Happens all the time. So I don't know what is so illegal about that. So they pointed here to Paul Gosar. He attends a House Oversight Committee. You can see that's what he looks like. He's from Arizona. And so that's the image they used. He looks like he's meddling. He looks like he's up to something. He's got those squinty sort of little beady eyes just running around all over the place. So, yeah, that's a face of an insurrectionist as far as I can tell. Now, these two sources, anonymous sources, that also helped plan a series of demonstrations that took place in multiple states around the country in the weeks between the election and the storming of the Capitol. All right. Again, is that illegal or problematic at all? You're allowed to protest and demonstrate in this country. We saw a lot of it in 2020. Even though they were fiery, they were still considered to be mostly peaceful. According to these sources, multiple people associated with the March for Trump and Stop the Steal, and you remember that was Ali Alexander, and there was a big movement there. We covered a lot of it here on this channel. Says that they took place during a period communicated with members of Congress throughout the process. So again, who cares? All perfectly legal. Along with Green, there were conspiratorial, pro-Trump Republicans, people like Gosar, Daubert, Mo Brooks, Madison Cawthorn, Andy Biggs. They're all just salivating on getting their hands in any of their business. And they'll be very excited if they can crack one congressperson. Can you imagine that? If they crack one person, one congressperson, if they get one text message or one email from one of these people, and it says something like, yeah, wouldn't it be nice if we could change the outcome of the election or something like that? Everybody's, collective heads will explode because they'll consider that to be, an actual coup. And they're driving so hard for that. It's like a needle in a haystack. They want that so badly. And they're going to continue to just beat this horse to death. So let's see, a couple more things that I wanted to mention here. Oh yeah, that's right. Turns out both sources, they say, also describe Mark Meadows as someone who played a major role in conversations surrounding the protests. Again, nothing illegal about that. Among other things, they say concerns were raised to Meadows about Ali Alexander's Stop the Steal rally. Meadows was subpoenaed by a committee last month from the select committee, and somebody says, one of Rolling Stone's article sources says that Meadows was 100% aware of what was going on. Again, whatever that means. 100% aware of the insurrection. Who knows? We also have here Marjorie Taylor Greene. You know what she looks like. She's somebody else who they're claiming was a part of this whole deal. Now, this is very interesting. They say, these sources, heading into January 6th, both sources say that they had discussed with other organizers, Trump's allies, and members of Congress, was a rally that would solely take place at the Ellipse, where the speakers, including the former president, would present, quote, evidence about issues with the election. Do you see what that just said? Both sources say that the rally would solely take place at the Ellipse, not the Capitol building. This demonstration would take place in conjunction with objections that were being made by Trump allies during the certification on the House floor that day. What? It was in a variety of calls, some with Gosar and Gosar's team, some with Marjorie Taylor Greene and her team. Mo Brooks, the organizer, says the Capitol was never in play, insists the planner. So why did they write a whole article about that then? because this is buried at the very end of the article, just like it's buried at the end of this segment. We're 20 minutes into the show, and as you can see, it is buried at the end of the article. Oh, so they were having a lot of conversations about just presenting evidence at the ellipse, and then the people who were actually in the congressional building would be able to file their objections. So what it sounds like is Marjorie Taylor Greene, Paul Gosar, Mo Brooks, everybody else, Madison Cawthorn, they're all actual representatives, and so they're going to be inside the building when they're going through the objections, raising their objections. You need one person from the House, one person from the Senate to go and formally lodge an objection. And so that's what they're organizing. And they're communicating with people who are outside, Trump and maybe Meadows and maybe some of these other people like Ali Alexander and Stop the Steal, about the evidence that maybe has come up outside from their private investigations. That never took place. That never was able to happen because of what happened at the Capitol building that day. But that does not mean that Donald Trump, Mark Meadows, or any of these other individuals, in particular Mo Brooks, Gosar, Marjorie Taylor Greene, or anybody else, was involved in an insurrection or was encouraging criminality in any way, shape, or form. They are smearing the entire organization because it is politically useful. But even their own article is describing conduct that is not criminal. A senior Republican staffer and a member for a member of Congress was also granted anonymity to discuss the ongoing investigation. So again, who is it? Come out, brother. If you think that this is such an assault on America, stand up. Let's hear from you. The staffer says their member was engaged in planning that was, quote, specifically and fully above board. Oh, okay. So actually this person is just defending their representative. So he's not even saying anything. A whole host of people let this go a totally different way, he says. They effed it up for a lot of people. We're pissed at everything that happened. Two sources claim they were early concerned about Ali Alexander's event, saying that there were other, quote, paramilitary groups, the First Amendment Praetorian, also the Oath Keepers and others. Alexander was filmed. Yeah. So there really isn't... There really isn't anything there. It turns out the Rolling Stones' own sources are sort of proffering forward. It was never about seizing the Capitol. It was about going in and having a conversation during the counting of the electoral votes inside and presenting the evidence outside. And it turned into this whole attack on the Capitol, which, as we're seeing, that there's some pretty strong indication that there were a lot of federal provocateurs who were a part of the entire operation in the first place. We talked about some video yesterday, also on this channel, showing police opening the doors and standing down, allowing protesters to just waltz on in to the Capitol building. Over 40 minutes. So there's a lot more to this story. Let's see what you have to say about it over at watchingthewatchers.locals.com. Taking some questions. Let's see if we got any on this topic. We have a couple of them. Says... Grouchy old cat lady is here, says, is that background real on your video? It looks fake, as if pasted in. This? Oh yeah, it's all real. Those are books. There's a light. That's my sign. That's yeah, I mean, here, how can I prove this to you? Okay, watch this. See this box of tissues? Watch the depth. See that? Yeah, it's not fake. It's real. It's the real deal. All right, I'll pick those up later. Let's see what else we've got. We got another question over from Hyper Patriot. Says, how about investigating the D.C. mayor not accepting more security and Nancy P. turning away extra support when presented with info about how big the rally was going to be? Let's start with those two. I'm so tired of January 6th and the COVID lies. I am also sick of it too. I think Hyper Patriot, if we had a real investigation, there would be a lot more here, right? I want to know from every single security personnel who was involved in the planning, not these 4 fake cops that they just brought out in front of the whatever committee that was to talk about how horrendous this whole thing was. I've got some more work that I'm doing on Officer Fanoni, and I think that there is some more funny business going on with that fella. We have Vienticus Prime says, didn't the FBI say that there was no pre-planning to January 6th? Is Rolling Stone saying that we can't trust the FBI? So I think they've had it like 3 different ways. I think it was there was no planning, then there was planning, then there was no planning, maybe 4 ways, then there was no planning again, then there was, and we're all going, okay, well, if there wasn't any planning, how was this an organized insurrection then? I mean, how was it going to be one person who takes control of the country, or what are we talking about? So why are we using the insurrection phrase if there's not going to be a new power coming in and seizing control of the country? That doesn't make any sense to me. You would have to have an incoming insurrectionary force, right? So that didn't make any sense. But then we're also, we're also saying that it was planned. If it was planned, then the FBI, how did they miss this? How did they forget, or how did they not secure the most important building in the entire U.S. government, where all of our elected officials are at the same time? Oh, yeah. So, okay. Well, they're sort of damned either way, aren't they? Good to see you, Vianticus. We have Jacob Chansley says, help me, Rob. Can't take it anymore. All I did was trespass and take some selfies. I want to go home. I want you to go home too, Jacob. Hopefully you are out of there soon. We have Monster One says, can someone ask Benny who paid for the BLM riots? The same people attended multiple riots across the country. Who funded that one? It's a good question. You think he'd be willing to answer that? I doubt it. We have another one from Sasha Shisha is back. Oh my goodness, this is a name I don't remember. I do remember, but it's been a long time. Good to see you. Hello, Rob. Hope you're doing well. This does not pertain to a particular segment of yours. This is more of me asking for advice and guidance. You're one of the few YouTubers I look up to. Uh-oh, big pressure. I've religiously followed your existence. It has been such a game changer for me. Fellow Watching the Watchers fans, if you have not watched the video, please do. Of the existence system. Got it. Yeah. So I made an existence system video some time ago. My question is, how do you keep going, pushing with your personal goals while maintaining a positive mindset, while the world around us is crumbling? Oh, that's a good question. This is something I struggle with. And for someone that follows your news religiously, I'd like to know how to tune that out when focusing on yourself. Once again, thank you for all you do. Keep up the great job. Sasha Shisha. Man, that is a good question. And that's a heavy one. Probably not one that I can get into too deeply here, Sasha, but I will record a separate video on locals sort of about this. Now, I will tell you the long and short of this is it requires nurturing, right? That is part of what the existence system is about. This is not something that comes without maintaining your energy, your motivation. And so you have to actively participate in your own happiness and your own well-being. Just like you brush your teeth, just like you eat right, just like you go to the gym, you've got to be training this puppy every day as well. And you got to at least, doesn't have to be hours at a time, but even 10 minutes, right? In the morning, I wake up and I do my existence system. I do affirmations. I read a little bit. I'm constantly sort of exploring and listening to lectures on YouTube. And it's something that I was not born with, right? I'm not sort of this freakish person who likes that stuff naturally. I've developed into that largely because of good coaching, good mentorship, listening to other people who are further ahead of me. I have a men's group that I meet with, and I built all these little different systems in that work for me. But it is, it is a difficult thing. And I will tell you this, I feel it a lot. I feel what you're talking about in terms of watching the world crumbling. There are times when I have to unplug from this show for the weekends. And sometimes I feel badly. It's like, it's a show and we have a lot of fun on here, but sometimes it can be a lot of pressure. It can be a lot of emotional weight that sort of, you just cover these stories and we have these conversations and I'm watching people get fired from their jobs and I'm watching the world crumble, as you say. And it is a lot of stress, but I make an active part of my day to clear as much of that out as I can. A great book that I'm reading right now is called The Happiness Hypothesis, and it talks about this idea of our minds being very complicated. And what's happening up in here, the self-dialogue that you have, the talking to yourself that exists on a regular, but you wake up and you say, that guy's an idiot, or this story is horrible, or I'm worried about this, or I'm hungry now, or I should probably take care of this person. That inner dialogue that you have, it's not really you, right? And in the Happiness Hypothesis, it's by a guy named Jonathan Haidt, and he talks about this metaphor of an elephant. And he says that you, in your existence, you are like the rider on top of an elephant, which is really your subconscious and all of the other operations that are happening in your brain. And so what you're trying to constantly battle is being a rider on top of this elephant. It's your conscious mind on top of this gigantic unconscious mind. And there are ways where you're never going to be able to totally control that elephant, right? You can't really force an elephant to do what you want it to do. It's going to go where it wants to go. But you develop this relationship between your conscious mind and your unconscious mind, and you're constantly massaging and practicing that relationship. And there are things that you can do to help guide this elephant around, kind of put these guardrails up so that when you start to feel desperate and in despair, when you start to feel like the world is crumbling, like what's the point of all of this garbage? You have some techniques and some tools so that that elephant that's under you doesn't start flipping out and spiraling out of control. It doesn't, drive itself off a cliff and make you start feeling like you're in the throes of depression. And so it's these little tools. And when you think about it that way, when you think about it as being, just a rider on this elephant, it takes a lot of the pressure out of it, right? You're not always going to be happy. You're dealing with this really complicated structure of the human mind. And so as long as we can continue to develop this relationship between these two working components, you're going the right direction. And it's not going to change overnight, right? You're not going to wake up and be that person who's running through the television commercials, running through fields of flowers. It's not going to happen that way. So when you start to recognize that relationship, I think you can take a little bit of pressure off yourself. Recognize, man, I got to wake up and I got to go train that beast, man. I got to go make sure that I am nurturing my mind just like I'm nurturing my body, just like I'm nurturing my relationships, just like I'm working on my business. And so that is a lot longer answer than I was expecting, but it is something that I think is very important. I think that if more people just took 10 minutes out of their day, they would realize how much happier they are just by sort of calming the mind to some degree. Man, but I could talk about that stuff all day. I'm super passionate about it. It's changed my life, right? And for anybody out there who says, oh, well, that's just great, you're a lawyer, whatever, you got all this free time. I was an alcoholic and somebody who was at the very bottom of my own despair, right? I was at the rock bottom. And by the grace of God and some very amazing people in my life, I was able to work myself out of that with a lot of help, shout out mom and many others. But it was a journey, right? But it is possible, I guess, if I can leave this question with any last semblance of hope. Amazing question, Sasha. I hope that helps. Please email me if you have any questions or about anything, right? I love these conversations. Okay, so next question from Sergeant Bob says, hopefully in a little over a year, the new 2022 Select Committee will follow suit and delve into where all the BLM and Antifa money came from. That's from Sergeant Bob. I wouldn't get your hopes up there, Sergeant Bob. I don't think that they're going to be looking into any of that. Kamala Harris was bailing them out. They burnt down the 3rd precinct in Minneapolis and, get them out of custody. We have another one from Monster One says, Rolling Stone, the same outlet that made up a fake story about horse dewormer and gunshot victims. Sure, they are credible. That was from Monster One. Yeah, Rolling Stone, look, and it's anonymous, so we have an answer on that. Former LEO says, in Discovery, would it be possible to obtain a list of all law enforcement officers who were detailed to the Capitol work in plainclothes and a full listing of all UC officers and all CIs? I don't think so. I don't think that you would get that. They would say it's overbroad, right? And they'd probably say, at this point, it's not available. I think they're still organizing it. Payroll records of all law enforcement, military detailed might also be helpful. Also, what the F is the ACLU doing to protect rights? The ACLU has changed dramatically since the 70s. I really don't know what they're doing anymore. But I get your point, former LEO. If I were representing a defendant, somebody who was charged in January 6th, and I said I wanted information about everything, they would only give me what is relevant to that particular case. I'd have to make a good case as to why I needed all of that other stuff. Otherwise, a judge would just say, nope, it's not relevant. Jeremy Matrita says, Rob, the Rolling Stone is a tabloid. They are known for writing opinion pieces and pushing them as factual. They aren't even good at writing about musicians and critiquing music. In my opinion, one would learn more from an actual stone rolling on the ground than from the publication of the same name. I love that, Jeremy. You have a Rolling Stone over here, and you have a stone that is rolling. Which one is more valuable to you in your life? Obviously, it is La Piedra. All right, that was a great comment, Jeremy. That's funny. We have X says, Rob, call me crazy conspiracy theorist, but is it possible that the J6 hotels used by the J6 protesters were funded by the J6 protesters? You better be careful tonight, because I think you may have cracked the case. You're going to have some SWAT team coming after you. But yeah, that sounds sensible to me. Monster One says, been saying it for a while. This committee is all about seizing power. Democrats are not going to stop because they know they are likely to lose in 2022. They have to move before then. If they drum up fraudulent charges against just one Republican in the Senate, Republicans won't be able to block their agenda. Yeah, I think it's if they can get that, they can get just one juicy story they're going to be able to milk this thing for another, probably 2 years. We have Peely Wally says, hey, Rob, hope you had a great weekend. I did, Peely. I hope you did also. Regarding the January 6th madness, with me being in the UK, I hear nothing of it. But is it covered often on mainstream news and so on in the US, or are the general public kept in the dark regarding the committee and their investigations? I just don't believe that the average citizen would support the ongoing nonsense and frankly corrupt investigation into political rivals and so on. Peely Wally, yeah, it's a good question. It is all over the news here, I would say. Whenever I go out, I've had conversations with people who, I had a conversation with a woman, very nice woman, who was asking me about YouTube and what I talk about. And she said something like, won't it be great when we have finally have law in society and people have to comply with their subpoenas? Talking about, Steve Bannon. And I just said, yeah, the law's a fickle thing, isn't it? Left it alone. Wasn't the appropriate time. But right, some people are seeing this, Peely, as a battle of good versus evil, right? If you think that what happened on January 6th, it was almost the seizure of American democracy, you want justice on that. And why wouldn't you? If you really believed that we almost lost America, that that narrative that CNN has been pushing, if you watch CNN every day and MSNBC every day, you're going to hear people like, oh, you know what? I didn't even finish the segment. I forgot. We didn't even finish the segment. You're going to hear people like this guy. This guy is over, what's this guy's name? Rep. Pete Aguilar. Yeah, so he's talking about all the different layers of what's going on here. So we have now, we're going to finish the questions. We're going to get back to those, but we have 2 other clips. This is Pete Aguilar. He's over on the January 6th Select Committee, and he is asked by this astute host, Velshi, on MSNBC, how is this different than impeachment? You guys have been beating this horse endlessly for the last 10 months. How is this any different than what we've already done? What are you going to find out? And he talks about the layers, all the layers, just like Benny Thompson was talking about the financial layer. So they just want to go, rip out all of their political opponents at every single layer. Here he is.
What surprised us so far is just how layered this is. And a lot of the the second impeachment work, still stands up. But we're going to have a lot more conversations and a lot more time to do the analysis that's necessary to connect the dots and to make sure that we tell the full and complete story of how close we came to losing democracy. And that's what we want folks to know, is how important and impactful a peaceful transfer of power is. That's a hallmark of democracy. What steps do we need to take, and what steps will others take who don't want us to do that? What steps can they take in the future in order to close these, put up roadblocks in our way? And so we need to make sure that we acknowledge those and that we do everything we can to protect democracy.
You see that, Peely Wally? So that's what he's talking about, right? It's all about protecting democracy. And he's framing it as this good versus evil thing. He says, look, we're on the side of righteousness. We are going to go and make sure that these insurrectionists never almost seize control of America again. And he says we have to be ultra vigilant on this, because if we're not identifying how we can plug those holes to stop future insurrectionists, then they're just watching and waiting. They're plotting. They're trying to identify how they can put, as he called it, more speed bumps in our way in protecting America. So this is not like a situation, if you're on this side of the argument, on this side of the conversation, where this was just a one-off thing. This was just a January 6th insurrection. It was a riot. It was something that was probably caused largely by government incompetence or negligence. But it's the opposite of that. This is a repeatable thing. There's an orchestrated, organized movement of Trump insurrectionists out there who are going to come back and do this again, damn it. And we have to make sure that it never happens. And so we have to just continue to save democracy, protect democracy is what he said. And in the last clip of him, he talks about this. What are we going to get out of this entire committee? That's always been my question. What are you going to give us? Are you going to give us a 9/11 report? Are you going to give us, some big, stinking set of paper that we're going to read, and it's going to say, on January 6th, America was at a moment of peril, right? Something like that, right? The same garbage we've been hearing for the last 10 months. What's going to come out of this? We already know that they sent this over to the Justice Department to indict Steve Bannon. We'll see if they do that. History is not on their side, right? That we've gone through it. I think that it's never really been, I don't think it's ever been found that somebody was convicted of what they're trying to convict Steve Bannon on, ever, as far as I looked into. So what are they doing? What's going to happen here? Well, here's what this representative says.
We do. And ultimately, we want to produce a report to the American public. We feel that we owe them that. So we're going to let this process play out, but we're not going to have a ton of patience. And so we're going to continue to have these interviews. We're going to continue to chase down every lead. But we feel the Department of Justice will follow the law. And the federal law is very clear that once it's certified and reported to the U.S. attorney, that they have a duty to bring it before a grand jury. So that's all we're asking, and that's our expectation.
But,
All right. So he said we're going to write a report. We're going to refer this stuff over to the DOJ. DOJ is going to have to decide what to do with it, but they have a duty to bring it to a grand jury. Which is yes, it's in the language, but they also have a duty to bring charges that are warranted, that have enough probable cause that would sustain a conviction, don't they? And so they're being very careful here. But you heard him say, well, we owe the American people a report. So I think that sort of that child predator enabler over at the Lincoln Project, he might have been onto something. He was saying things like, this whole thing's probably not going to go anywhere. I think I agree with that. All right, let's go back to the questions over from watchingthewatchers.locals.com. That's a nice little segue, Peely Wally. Good question. We have former LEO says, can't confront your accusers. What have we turned into, and it turns my stomach. Yeah, it's the confrontation clause here in this country. Former officer has been eviscerated. Monster One says, so Marjorie Taylor Greene was only in Congress for 3 days, yet was involved in all these plots. This is obviously a fake story, using the left's villains to get clicks from the smooth brains. Yeah, because they don't have enough information, so there's no folds in the crevice of the skull, or in the brain matter. Three Girlies says they're speaking on anonymity. Seems like a lot of gaslighting. So that means there's no examination as well. That means there's no due process for anybody like Mark Meadows or any other person. There is no way they're cracking the Congress persons that they have listed. This is exactly like the Russian collusion crap all over again. That's from Three Girlies. And shout out to the Three Girlies family over there. Saw that everybody's healthy and on the up. Love that. Nadarb says, yo, just an FYI, I usually won't see your stream under the live section on Rumble if I'm not logged into it. But today it was there without being logged in, so maybe that's a good sign. Now it seems to me like Benny is an avid fisherman because you've done a lot of fishing lately. Unfortunately for Benny, he isn't too good at catching. He can fish all day long, no problem, but just can't get one reeled in. Oh well. Sucks to be Benny. That's from Nadarb. Just fishing away, just trying to get whatever he can, but it's not too good. X says, it only took a couple of weeks for the U.S. government to link 9/11 to Osama and Al-Qaeda. What's taken so long with J6? And where is the CIA? It's a good question, X. I think that they've just identified a big bucket of people that they call domestic terrorists. And there's little subdivisions of that. Homegrown domestic terrorists, homegrown violent extremists, homegrown whatever, racial epithet, probably going to have a pronoun category any day now. It's complicated business. Kareem says, I'm not sure if it is just me, but lately I've been unable to watch your videos live on YouTube. It's not just you, Kareem. If it weren't for my locals account, I would only be able to watch the videos later. That's exactly how it's supposed to be now, Kareem. I apologize that you didn't get the memo. Maybe I should have been a little bit more clear about the rollout. But yeah, so we're changing it. So we're going to be recording live, and then we're going to be premiering it on YouTube, Kareem. And the reason for that is because YouTube penalizes our live streams. So we're just not going to do many live streams on there anymore. We are, but the regular show is just going to be sort of pre-recorded. We're going to do the interactive portion of this here on Locals, and then we are going to premiere it on YouTube. And look, it's not something that I want to do, okay? I know a lot of people are unhappy about this on YouTube. I'm sorry about it. I'm sorry. It's more work for me. I have to stop and sort of edit everything and then re-upload it rather than just streaming one time and being done with it. But the channel is literally dying without any recorded videos. If it's just live streams, the channel is not growing, because as soon as the live is done, it pulls it out of everything. And so I have to make the change. I know it's super frustrating, but it's for, it's like you got to cut off the gangrene in order to survive. That's what we're doing here. YouTube's desperate times, my friends. We have, okay, thank you for that one, Kareem. Couple more before we jump into the next. We have a lot to get to today. It's going to be a long show. Hunter Biden says, I wonder if the same person who stole Pelosi's laptop is the same person who stole mine. I wonder if she had sex tapes on them like I did. If she did, I want to see them. That's from Hunter Biden. Hunter wants to see them. I don't want to see them ever. In fact, I don't want to be in the same room as them. We have Speech Unleashed says, this is just more proof that people should make sure to protect their ID when dealing with or posting about political things on social media. You never know when it's going to come around to bite them in the rear. Yeah, that's from Speech Unleashed. Do you remember after January 6th, there were people who were making websites about us and me on this show and saying that I was there on January 6th. I'm like, hello, dummies. I was recording from Scottsdale. I was broadcasting here. So yeah, you got to be careful. People will associate you with all sorts of stuff. Wants to know lady, she, her, and hers, says, so how can we ascertain more about the anonymous testimony that they are collecting? Who are they? Are they associated with the FBI? Don't know. The Rolling Stone knows, though, and they're not going to tell you. Thank you for the pronouns, just so I can make sure about that. Kincaid says, good evening, Rob. Thoughts on their breakdown? Let's see here. Fabricate behavior and guide citizens on how to navigate while also publicizing general intent. B, this creates unruly masses with control. Unlike most historical events that have both been about contesting on the floor and 2020 elections had support from members in Congress and the Senate and both, until that very well planned drama, at least 3 states would have likely changed votes. Question, do you think that the 2020 election down in Georgia, have UCLA lawyers superseding town clerks, was fair? So I don't know about that story. The Georgia UCLA lawyers superseding town clerks. I don't know that story, Kincaid, but I will say this. There was a lot of stuff that we covered here on this channel, specifically talking about all the multiple lawsuits that were taking place all over the country before the election took place. Okay, I have slides that cover it. We made charts, talked about who was winning in each case. We went through a lot of lawsuits. A lot of people were interested in this, and they were all about changing the rules, all of them. They were all about moving the election date back or allowing more sort of ballot harvesting, giving people signature verification waivers so that they don't have to prove any of this stuff, all on the back of COVID. And so I don't know what happened with Georgia or UCLA, but yeah, all of the rules changed all over the place, all in 2020. And so you can't even say, I've never even said that it was stolen, because that would mean that they were not entitled to something, but they changed the rules and then they won under those rules. So you can call that, label that whatever you want. But, Joe Biden's the president. A lot of rules changed. There's not much else to say about that other than the Republicans got their rear ends handed to them in court all over the place. Okay, a couple other questions. We got to move on. So let's pick up the pace here, Rob. What are you doing? My Google's is loading. There it is. Now it's back. Yeah, Sergeant Bob says, I told Miss Lucky that for Christmas I want a podium. Say hello to your new leader and master, America. Sergeant Bob and Miss Lucky. That wouldn't be so bad. I'd be okay with that. Steve Baldwin says, would you play Russian roulette with Alec Baldwin? No. I would not. I have to say that. My mom watches this show. Sasha Shisha says, hi, yes, typo there. I meant to say existence systems. Would love to watch a separate video on this. Okay, I can definitely put more of that together, Sasha. Yeah, I think, it's a big part of what I do. I am sort of obsessed with some of that stuff. So I'd love to talk about it. We can definitely set up another even live stream. Kincaid says, great author. Another book from The Righteous Mind is great as well. Is that Jonathan Haidt? Let's see here. So I've not read that one. I'm just experimenting with some Jonathan Haidt. Love it. I think it's quite good. We have somebody asked, do you still drink socially or completely given up? 0 alcohol, nothing. I don't drink at all, not even socially. I'm not in the category of people who are, 100% abstinent from everything. Like there are some people that they won't even take pain pills or they won't even drink coffee or anything like that. I'm not like that. I don't have a problem with really anything else other than alcohol. It was just not good for me. And once I just decided that I don't need it, I stopped sort of craving it. I stopped wanting to be in environments that have it, and everything got a lot better. But it takes a lot of work. I still am active in my recovery. I meet with my men's group every Tuesday, and we talk the 12 steps, and we talk a lot about humility and powerlessness and God and all of those things. And it's been transformative in my life. And so, I know sometimes for some people it is scary to talk about. It's something that still has a stigma, but I think that it's worse to not talk about it and suffer from it than it is to just talk about it and stop suffering from it. Just crack that shell. If it's something that you're contemplating, hey, by the way, we're always looking for new guys who want to come and join our men's group. So it's a Tuesday men's group, 5:30 Arizona time. And if you're somebody who is really, really hurting and you want to make a serious change, this is not sort of like a patty cake men's group, send me an email. And I mean that sincerely, at robert@rrlawaz.com. And we'll have a conversation about it. And if you need some help, let me know. And I mean that sincerely, right? So let me know. All right. So a couple other questions here is from Grouchy Old Lady says, they should end the committee as quickly as they ended the research into where the COVID virus came from. Two different standards. Totally. And they canceled you, right, off the internet if you were questioning any of that. All right. We have I'm Not Gas says, they want to bury Steve Bannon. He was key to Trump's win and really embodies the grassroots right of 2016. If they could take out a couple of the top generals, it will be very significant. Those were great questions and conversation over from watchingthewatchers.locals.com. If you want to join in our community, please head on over there. We have a lot of amazing people there, as you can see. Okay, so we're going to jump into the next segment. Let's see what else we've got. All right. Oh, yeah, Kyle Rittenhouse is coming up next. Good stuff on this one. All right. Okay. Kyle Rittenhouse was back in court today. You recall the last time we talked about Kyle's case, he was presenting his expert witness. Recall, we have a number of different people involved in the case. We're going to flesh out what happened today in court. I've got several clips. It was an interesting day, no question about it. Before we dive into everything, let's make sure we're caught up to speed. Here is what the board looks like. Kyle Rittenhouse's case is scheduled. I believe the trial date is November 1st. Anyways, it's coming up very soon. We've got to make sure that we're familiar with all of the different individuals who are going to be a part of the trial. You can see here in the middle, we've got Judge Bruce Schroeder. Going to hear from him today. He got a little bit ornery with Thomas Binger. Thomas Binger over here is the lead prosecutor on the case, and he is somebody, that is an interesting fella. We also have James Krause. He's an assistant prosecutor. They are representing the government, but they're also sort of, advocating on behalf of Gage Grosskreutz. He is the sole survivor of the shooting. He was shot in the arm. And so depending on how you categorize him, he's either the assailant who attacked Kyle Rittenhouse, and Kyle Rittenhouse was actively defending himself, or he is the victim. If you're the government, Thomas Binger was calling Gage Grosskreutz, of course, the victim. We have Anthony Huber. He's no longer with us. He's deceased. You can see him. This is from the scene where he was sort of on top of Kyle. Kyle is down here in the bottom. We have Joseph Rosenbaum, also deceased. Going to hear a little bit more about him today. We have Mr. Robert Willis, who was brought into court today, but I don't think we're actually going to see him in the future trial. We have on the right-hand side with the defense, we've got Kyle Rittenhouse, of course, we all know he is. We've got two of his attorneys. Mark Richards was there today, along with Corey Chifarisi. Chirafisi is how you say it. And Chirafisi was just entertaining as hell today. We're going to take a look at his testimony. We also have Dr. John Black. We didn't hear from him. He is the defense witness, going to be talking about use of force. And my understanding is he's still going to be in court to testify, but only on a limited, narrowed line of questioning. And so a lot is happening right now. Remember, the trial is scheduled for next week, and we're fleshing out the final issues. We've got a lot of things to figure out. Two of the big issues are about expert witnesses. And so you remember that Kyle Rittenhouse was charged with these different violations. We have reckless homicide, reckless endangering society, recklessly endangering society down here. We have possessing a dangerous weapon. We have intentional homicide, 2 counts of that. Use of a dangerous weapon, 3 counts, and one count of attempted homicide. That's for Grosskreutz. And so we're talking about these different concepts. Recklessness, right? Talking about what does recklessly mean? And what about stuff about self-defense and use of force? When is it appropriate to use force against somebody? When is self-defense something that pops up in a given context? And so we were listening to expert witnesses opine about this last week, or the last time we talked about this case. I think it might have been the week before that. We heard from this fellow, John Black, Dr. John Black, and he testified and qualified himself as an expert witness in what's called a Daubert hearing. Here we have this fellow who is doctor. He's not a doctor. He's actually somebody who is a, did I have a clip of this? I think I have a clip of this guy. So my slides are a little bit out of order, but I think I have a clip of this guy. This is Mr. Willis. And so today was kind of a train wreck in court. I really don't like how this is all being organized. You're going to see that a lot of the issues are conflating themselves with one another. Typically, the way that a criminal case will work is you'll have some very clear delineations on certain issues, right? An officer can testify about X, Y, and Z, but not about A, B, or C. And it's very clear, you know exactly what's happening, and the cases progress through a very cleanly delineated and articulated process. You talk about certain things at certain time. So an example would be, you wouldn't be talking about a Daubert expert witness at the same time that you're talking about motions in limine. Okay, now these are two things that probably sound like foreign language to you, but a Daubert hearing is a conversation about an expert witness. Is this expert qualified? We're going to call him in here and put him in front of a jury. Is he actually an expert? We got to haul him in court and talk about what he can talk about. Make sure he is actually who he says he is and he is actually qualified. There's also a separate issue called a motion in limine, which is you're trying to limit certain testimony from coming into court. And so you would do certain things in the correct order, right? You would talk about that expert witness, whether they're actually an expert. Then if you decide that they come into court, then you might want to limit what they can say. So you do things in that order. You bring the expert in, he's qualified, he comes into court. Okay, what's he going to talk about? We're going to limit some of that testimony with the motions in limine. This judge kind of is not really doing that. He's kind of just taking all of these issues on the fly. We're sort of talking about this expert witness, but we're also going to be talking about the motions in limine. We're then going to sort of see, well, what's he going to testify about that? Is he going to talk about that? Well, he might. Well, is that in one of your motions in limine? So you might limit? Yes, and it's all being conflated together. And so you're going to see some actual frustration from everybody in court today. It was very interesting. I don't think it's a very appropriate way to manage a case flow. If I can be candid about this, the judge has a style that is just not something that I necessarily understand or appreciate, but judges are entitled to run courtrooms however they want to do that. So let's listen in. This was Mr. Willis. So this was going to be the prosecution expert witness. They may not even use him. We're going to take 10 seconds on this clip because he's probably not even going to be used. We spent about 2 hours preparing for this, and then it turns out they may not even use this witness. So this is what the government was going to bring in.
When you were an instructor at the Northeast Wisconsin Technical College, what subjects did you instruct on?
Huge variety, actually. I was somewhat their utility man. I taught in the police academy, and my primary responsibility was use of force, defensive tactics, control tactics, pepper spray, taser, baton, those sorts of things, firearms. And I also taught professional communication skills, crisis intervention, taught vehicle contacts, vehicle stops, emergency vehicle operation, and then a host of academic subjects ranging from ethics to constitutional law, to criminal law, juvenile law, how to testify in court, and again, a host of other academic topics.
All right, so that's Bob, as you can see, and he's talking about a lot of experience. He's got a huge variety of topics that he can cover: police academy, primary responsibility, all that stuff. We spent several hours talking about this guy, and he did not even. It turns out that he's probably not even going to get called into court. So the prosecution basically at the end of this says, "Well, Judge, if we would have addressed a prior issue about what expert witnesses we're going to be talking about in a prior motion that was before the court, if we would have delineated this, I wouldn't have even called an expert witness in the first place." And so the judge is like, well, but I wanted to see everything before we decided what to do. And so it's just a stylistic thing. It's confusing to me, but the judge apparently has some method to the madness. Can you see this sunlight peering through the window? Gonna have to do something about that. I'll do that tomorrow. The sun is changing, and I've never seen this shadow coming through. Okay, so all right, so let's get back into the Rittenhouse case. And what we can see, I've got a couple clips, and I want to start off by talking about, so expert witnesses are probably, going to be very limited, not going to be the crux of the case. What we're now talking about are things called motions in limine. Again, so this is where we're limiting testimony. And there's a very interesting motion that the government submitted that I want to share with you. You probably remember this video. We're going to play that here in a quick minute, but this is from before any of the altercation took place in Kenosha. This is when Kyle and some other individuals that he's with are walking around and they're interfacing with police. You see police are all over there in the background. You see the sirens or the flashing lights. And if you recall, we talked about this a year ago when we were talking about Kyle Rittenhouse, but he is walking up to the police with his all of his gear on, with his gun, and the police say something like, "We really appreciate you guys. We really do." And they also give Kyle some water bottles. And so what the prosecution is asking for here, they don't want this video or any of those conversations to come into court. They don't want the jury to see Kyle Rittenhouse interfacing with these police officers, because if they do, the jurors might think that the police were endorsing Kyle's behavior, because they said, "We really appreciate you guys. We really do." Right? And so how can Kyle be a reckless person who's this maniac running around the streets of Kenosha with a gun if the police are like, "Yeah, good job. Hey, well done. We appreciate you. Here, have a water bottle." Right? It doesn't serve them. So they're trying to limit that from coming in. It's called a motion in limine. They don't want the jury to hear about it. And we're going to see what the argument looks like in court. Before we do, let's refresh our memories, refresh our recollection, to use legal terms, about the video itself. This is from last year. Kyle Rittenhouse was walking around in Kenosha.
If you can keep people from pointing their guns at the crowd, it'd be great.
Yeah, no laser pointers either. No laser pointers. They think that's guns too.
Okay, these are cell phones.
That's what
Cell phone
started
video,
most of
very
it.
grainy. You see Kyle is right there walking.
Way back by the gas station again.
Somebody else is walking. Kyle has his firearm. They're talking about not pointing guns.
Need water? Seriously. Guys to our right, we need water. We need water. We'll throw you one.
Rittenhouse says we need water.
All right, come on, guys, let's get out of here.
Some police are over there.
We'll take a couple. Thank you.
So a lot of police see Kyle walking around with his gun.
Yes, you. You are a civilian. This area is closed to him. You're trespassing. Leave.
He gets, looks like some water.
We got a couple. We got to save a couple, but we'll give you a couple. We appreciate you guys. We really do.
Hear that?
Hey, can we go this way? Can we walk this way? Hold on. I need a step.
I'm sure they have a lot of bottles of water.
That's all we can spare.
All right, so you get the gist of it. So Kyle goes, "You need some water?" "Yeah, we got some water to spare. Here's a couple of them." He goes, "Cop, we appreciate you guys. We really do. Thanks for being here. Keep up the great work." All of that. And so the prosecution, they do not want the jurors to see that. If they see that the cops were sort of tacitly endorsing that activity, it's really hard to make the claim that Kyle Rittenhouse is some sort of crazed, reckless maniac, isn't it? Here is Thomas Binger making that argument that this should not come into court. Here he is.
It's the motion to eliminate talks about whether or not anonymous law enforcement officers made statements earlier in the evening regarding the defendant's activities, or whether or not they talked about their plans in terms of crowd control or things like that. And this is not a trial about the police activities. It's not a trial about police tactics. It's not a trial about whether or not law enforcement that night took action or didn't take action. This is a case about what the defendant did that night. And I'm concerned that this is going to be turned into a trial over what law enforcement should or shouldn't have done that night. And I don't think that's what this court or what this trial should be deciding.
Okay, so my audio was I'm gonna have to change my audio settings. I think you heard that, but I don't think that I heard that. I know that I did not hear that, and so I'm gonna have to make a quick audio change. But if I recall what he said in there, it's not gonna impact the show. Don't worry about that. But if I recall what he said in there, he's talking about provocateurs, and he's talking about jury selections, and he's in particular he's saying, look, we have this sort of disagreement about who was the initial aggressor here, especially when it comes to the Rosenbaum case. Rosenbaum was the first person who was shot. And if you remember, it was the guy in the red shirt, the guy who's bald that we talked about at the very start of the show on our diagram of everybody who's involved in this case. Rosenbaum was running sort of, it looked like to me when I said it, towards Kyle, and then Kyle turned around and shot him. And so from the video that we saw, that we analyzed here on this channel, Rosenbaum was the aggressor. Now, what Binger is saying is that they've got video of FBI footage showing that Rittenhouse was the ultimate aggressor who sort of aggressed and provoked Rosenbaum. And so Rosenbaum responding to Kyle is not justification for Kyle to use self-defense. We covered that statute at some moment in time, but here's the short and dirty concept. If you are going to be using the self-defense standard, you don't get to go and provoke the initial assault, right? If you're standing in the middle of a bar and you walk up to somebody else and you smack them in the head and you say, "Hey, dippy," boop, and you pop them in the head and they spill their beer and they attack you, and then you shoot them and you say, "Oh, that was self-defense. They were going to kill me," right? You don't get to use that self-defense. You started it. So that's what we're talking about. Binger is saying that Kyle started it and he's the provocateur. And if we bring in, is this clip? I can't tell. And let me show you the other argument here. Let me show you, this is the Kyle Rittenhouse's attorney now, who is now sort of just aghast at what he is hearing from the prosecution. Let's listen in. All right, I know you can't hear that now because I changed the audio. I'm changing it back. Here he is.
Understand this, that no one is saying that because the police, however they reacted, that Mr. Rittenhouse was lawful and justified. That is not a defense to a charge. But Mr. Binger has chosen to charge reckless conduct. Okay? He's made that decision. Now, he has to be able to show the defendant's conduct showed an utter disregard for human life. All I've done is looked at the jury instruction on what a fact finder is supposed to consider when making that determination, Your Honor. And if you look at that instruction, they are to consider what the defendant was doing, why he was engaged in that conduct, how dangerous that conduct was, how obvious the danger was, whether the conduct shows disregard for life, and all other facts and circumstances related to that conduct. And I would submit to you conversations, interactions that he has with law enforcement go to his state of mind as to whether or not, A, how obvious that danger was, and whether it was actually dangerous conduct. Those are relevant factors to determine reckless behavior. And when he has conversations with police officers and they let him go about his business, and when the police say things like they've said on that tape, those go to his state of mind. They are absolutely relevant to the charge of reckless. He is charged with 3 different counts of reckless behavior in this case. So the way that Mr. Binger has chosen to charge the case has opened up, in our view, has opened up the facts and circumstances surrounding what had happened, because the totality of the circumstances go into play in determining whether or not behavior is shows an utter disregard for human life. And that's what we're saying it was.
Okay, so you could hear his argument in response, and he's making the argument that if you're going to talk about recklessness, then you have to sort of prove that. And they opened the door. They alleged recklessness. Kyle was walking around the entire night with a gun on. Multiple police saw that activity, didn't consider that to be reckless. And so they're tying this back to Kyle Rittenhouse's frame of mind. Did the police tell him to, young boy, young man, go on home or anything like that? No, they didn't. They just said, hey, we actually appreciate you. Thanks for being here. Here's some water. And so it goes to Kyle Rittenhouse's mental state. Did Kyle Rittenhouse, did he rise to the level of recklessness or not? I think it absolutely is relevant to this because it frames everything in context, right? It wasn't a madman running around a street with a gun. It's Kyle Rittenhouse with a group of people that seemed to be endorsed by the police to some degree. So here's the judge now. The judge tells you a little bit more about him. He says, well, let me tell you more about me. I want a lot of stuff to come in, and so I'm probably going to allow the evidence that we just heard come in. It's probably going to be coming in. We'll probably hear that in the trial. Here's the judge.
As you know, you've tried cases in here. I'm the one who always wants to hold back until I see the whole field of evidence, because I just hate being up here after making a ruling and saying something will or won't come in, and everyone's planning on that, and then suddenly say, whoops, I just changed my mind. So I don't want to do that. So I give you, in many instances, what I'm thinking about as far as part of what's going to be the ruling. And I would tell you at this point, I would think that that probably is admissible in this case.
Understood. Thank you.
Okay. So then.
All right. So the judge is saying probably going to come in, and the judge does this, and it really sort of bugs me. Like his rules are not hard. I'm probably going to let it come in, allow more to come in. It's like, yes or no, judge? Is it coming in? Yes or no? So he's going to be an interesting judge. Very, very interesting. Okay, this is the other clip. I think I was explaining a different clip. This is the clip that I was talking about previously. The audio, just so you understand what's happening, it's only coming through one earbud, and it's the earbud that I don't have in, so I can't hear it. But I watched it all earlier, and so I think I know what's happening. But they're talking about now provocation. So this is that conversation I was having about Rosenbaum being the primary aggressor versus Kyle Rittenhouse being the prior aggressor. And in this clip, Thomas Binger alerts us to the fact that they actually have FBI video, it sounds like, of Kyle chasing Rosenbaum first. So this was news to me. We haven't seen this anywhere else to my knowledge, but apparently Kyle was chasing Rosenbaum first. We'll see what that looks like. I doubt it. I don't really think that changes the analysis anyways. Provided it wasn't like immediately, before that. We'll see. Let's take a look and see what Binger had to say this afternoon.
Well, Your Honor, in terms of the elements of self-defense, the provocation only comes into play in the jury instructions in that narrow scope of whether or not the defendant, if he provoked the attack, therefore would not have the right to claim self-defense. None of these elements or jury instructions talk about whether or not the victim or the decedent here, whether he provokes it or whether that somehow affects the decision of the defendant here. So I disagree with the court that provocation is the key issue in this case. Now, we're going to talk about it. I understand that. There's going to be some evidence about that. The defense is going to argue as to who provoked it, and we're going to respond with an FBI video that shows the defendant chasing down Mr. Rosenbaum and confronting him first. But legally, in terms of the elements here, and again, Jackson stands for whether or not this evidence is relevant to the elements of the crime. I don't see any element here where Mr. Rosenbaum's provocation or being the aggressor changes the jury's decision pursuant to the elements of self-defense.
Okay, so there's Thomas Binger, and he's talking about provocation, FBI video. I've not seen it. Don't think it's out there on the internet yet, but allegedly showing Kyle Rittenhouse chasing Rosenbaum. And if you recall, right, that's where the self-defense statute evaporates. You don't get to go and initiate something to provoke somebody, be the initial aggressor, and then claim self-defense, which is where most of this has latched in my mind. From what we saw, right, everything that we went through frame by frame. We saw a lot of other people with guns and other guns going off in the air. Looked like a clear case of self-defense to me. Now, if this comes out differently, right, and Kyle's chasing everybody around, shooting, or threatening to shoot them, that changes the equation. But I'm not so sure that I buy Binger's characterization of that based on what we've seen. So you might see another video from the FBI, of Kyle running through, and maybe Rosenbaum will be on there. But this is a factual issue that they're going to have to flesh out. Now, here's Corey Chirafisi. This is the defense lawyer now. And just take a look at the body language here alone, right? This is Mark Richards, who is Kyle's primary lawyer. And he's just lounging, man. He's just lounging back, just having a good old time, just kind of soaking it all in. And Corey Chirafisi is about to just drop it. Now he is he's like shocked that he's even having to deal with Thomas Binger. But let's listen in on what he has to say, showing that all the provocation stuff is just not a good argument.
If I attack you and you use self-defense, the jury gets to hear that because that goes to the reasonableness of your actions.
Look at that.
It doesn't say provocation. It uses it all in terms of the reasonableness of what the defendant believed. And if someone else, if Rosenbaum is the aggressor, it goes directly to the issue of whether or not someone would believe that Mr. Rittenhouse's actions were reasonable. They're not reasonable if we're having a prayer circle and he walks up and shoots Mr. Rosenbaum, not reasonable. If Mr. Rosenbaum is waiting for him, chases him, after telling him he's going to kill him, that goes to whether or not Mr. Rittenhouse's actions were reasonable. It's that simple. That's it. The aggressor goes to the reasonableness, period.
Look at this face. Watch him. Look. Watch him clear it. Puts his glasses on. He's so mad. Zoom in on Kyle. Get it. Yeah. And so I saw a comment over on our secret YouTube chat saying, yeah, fatten him up a little bit. Puff that face up a little bit. Get a little bit more of the pimples going. Young him up a bit. I think it's a very astute observation. All right. And so our last clip, I believe, is here. We've got Thomas Binger once again, I think, closing this out. I think we've got one final clip. Now, I'll be honest, I don't know where a lot of these issues have settled yet because the judge is sort of running things haphazardly. I think that there may be a final order that the judge writes that gives us some more clear guidelines before the trial starts. But there is, when I came in to do the show, I was still finishing up the rest of the hearing. So I did not finish it entirely, but this is where I sort of left off. And the judge is scolding the prosecutor here because the prosecutor is getting frustrated with the judge, and it's just not, it's a train wreck. Let's listen in.
To that effect. All we're talking about is arson. We're talking about being loud and disorderly. We're talking about being.
I can't believe some of the things you're saying. I mean,
alleged to
all
be a
we're
rioter.
talking about is arson. Come on.
Arson to a dumpster.
Are arson to a dumpster, Your Honor? Yes.
Arson to, pushing towards a gas station, they claim.
Yeah,
And
he
whether
pushed.
it's or not,
He
it's
didn't push it towards the gas station.
you
He
know,
pushed it in the
and
middle of the
this
road to
idea
block.
there's a zone where it's okay that it's unsafe south of Sheridan Road because the police are only going, or 60th Street because the police are only going to that far south. So I guess everybody lives at his risk. Past that, I don't know what you're saying.
That's not what I said, Your Honor. And Mr. Rosenbaum did not push the dumpster towards a gas station.
I don't.
All right, so you can just see they're kind of going back and forth. The judge is just getting fed up with the whole thing, and he's, what's your point? Get to your point. All right, I'm tired of it. And it really was kind of a messy hearing, if I can be perfectly honest. It felt very disorganized to me. It felt like we were talking in circles. It felt like a lot of it was unnecessary. Like we shouldn't have even done the Daubert hearings and qualified the expert witnesses if we had already settled out the scope of their proposed testimony in the first place. But the judge just didn't do it that way. Strange proceeding. I honestly don't, have a lot of hope for the trial in terms of being run competently, right? We did see with Derek Chauvin that you may not have liked that outcome, but that judge ran a competent trial, right? It was not loosey. It was very by the book. And that there's something to be said for that. I'm not sure we're going to get that same precision in the Rittenhouse case. All right, let's see what we've got over from watchingthewatchers.locals.com. We've got Kareem responding back to our prior segment. Says, sorry, I missed the memo about YouTube. I was busy traveling in the States one more time. Now I'm back in the mandatory 14-day quarantine. It sucks, but it was worth it. So I guess this means super chats are no longer available. That's unfortunate. I thought they were good and also another source of revenue for your channel. So it is true. So first of all, we can get super chats in our secret YouTube unlisted cabal chat, which which is nice. But I'm not really in it for the money, right? For the revenue. I want the channel to be something that continues to grow. I want our community to grow. I want to make sure the message gets out. And so I'd rather have a premiere go. And even though we're going to lose a little bit of the live chat functionality, we are going to reserve that. We're going to move that off of YouTube onto locals, and we're going to continue to make changes. But I want to use the platform the way the platforms are built, right? YouTube is not really a live stream platform. It's a recorded video platform. And so we're going to try that. If it doesn't work, then we'll revert back. But, you know, it is a change. I know it's frustrating, but we'll see where it goes. I think long term, it's going to be a better format for us. So News Now, I'm not sure though. We'll see. It's an experiment. News Now Wyoming says, I know that lawyers can find experts to say whatever they want, but I'm curious to know how many experts the prosecutors had to go through to find one that says what they want him to say. He also seems a lot less qualified overall. And when I watched the clips this afternoon, how many experts each side had to talk to should be disclosed to the jurors. Interesting. Defense found their expert first try. Prosecutors went through 20 people before finding one seems relevant. It is, you know, it is relevant, right? It's like trying to find that needle in a haystack sometimes, but I think it's a good point. You know, turns out they're probably not even going to be using that guy, but I ultimately agree with your analysis on there. I think that Dr. Black was way more qualified than Mr. Willis, which is probably why they're not in a real rush to introduce an expert witness. The prosecution's like, well, we don't even really need to call him. They didn't want to call expert witnesses in the first place because I think they are probably recognizing that an expert is going to testify the way the defense wants. News Now Wyoming says, I know that lawyers can find... Oh, already read that one. Sorry about that. Good to see you, though. Thanks. Good question, News Now. Former LEO says, I don't see how the assailant victim can avoid prosecution for various gun charges. That's Gage Grosskreutz. And I'm not sure if he is a convicted felon in possession of a handgun and a concealed weapon. I think he was, right? Didn't he have some sort of assault charges or something like that? He just gets a walk, or if Rittenhouse is not convicted, that means his self-defense claim stands, and he was only protecting himself from an assault with a deadly weapon. I agree with you on that, former LEO. Yeah, Gage Grosskreutz had a gun, and he had most of his elbows shot off through Kyle. But he's sitting there on the side of the road with a, seriously injured arm with a handgun in his hand. So seemed like self-defense to me. Thunder7 says, please help me understand something. During the Chauvin trial, you spoke about the BLM activist juror who lied about his background to get on the jury. How can the defense really discover that no potential Rittenhouse juror is involved with Antifa.BLM and other lunatic left mobs? And if the juror lies and gets onto the jury and then uncovered, will there be a mistrial? I look forward to your legal analysis starting on November 1st. I'm looking forward to it too. We've been waiting a long time for Kyle's case, and I really am looking forward to hopefully seeing the justice system function as it should. We'll see. But it is a gigantic problem, isn't it? And we're going to see what happens with with Chauvin's case. My understanding is he finally found a lawyer who's going to take his appeal. That should be appealed up. I think that what we saw with that guy's name was Brandon Mitchell, I think, if I'm not mistaken. Brandon Mitchell, that secret juror who was going to George Floyd rallies and actively speaking out on behalf of George Floyd, made his way onto the juror. I think he lied on the juror questionnaire. I think that is a mistrial, personally. You have a biased juror who lied to get on the panel. I think the whole thing should be redone, personally. But we'll see if the justice system agrees. I'm Not Gas says... 10/25/2021, Rob discovers the sun changes positions. Is it true though? Aren't we living on a flat disk? It's probably all part of that secret conspiracy. It's probably Joe Biden's fault, is what I think it is. Freaking Joe Biden. Putting the sun on me in the middle of a show. Outraged. Monster One says, did anyone see the people trying to compare Kyle to Baldwin? They claim it's hypocrisy to want Baldwin held accountable, but not Kyle. I'm sure you're going to see all sorts of those analogies. Sergeant Bob says that Bob has too broad a self-presented resume. His statement was an alphabet soup. Should focus on the relevant. That's from Sergeant Bob. You know what they say about some people like that, right? If you are a, what do they call it? Jack of all trades, master of none, is what Sergeant Bob just said there. Monster One says, I don't like the fact that the prosecution can withhold evidence. This is how innocent people end up in jail for life. It's true. A lot of problems with this. I rage often about discovery and about non-disclosures. I'm Not Gas says, just send the defense your frame-by-frame breakdown analysis and bill them for 50 hours. Open and shut case. I thought so too. You know, we did a real lot of deep dives on the Rittenhouse case some time ago. It's kind of how this channel got its start, honestly. Grouchy Old Cat Lady says, did they ever take your frame-by-frame episode on Kyle? They did. Yes, they took that down. It is available. I think it's on Rumble. Yeah, it's deleted. It's not on our YouTube channel anymore. Flagged it, had to go. Can you believe that? I will re-upload all the Kyle stuff, maybe to a Kyle Rittenhouse channel on Locals. We can't have it on YouTube. It's over 18. It's deleted. It's graphic content. Even though it was on there for a long time, I got flagged. I'm Not Gas says, this judge is as scatterbrained as Biden. I think I might possibly think that I will maybe agree to the circumstances if it suits my mind. Yeah, it's exactly what it sounds like. I think I might possibly think that I will maybe agree to the circumstances if it suits my mind. Exactly how he sounds. I'm Not Gas's. And he says, like every other word. Stop that. I know I have my fill of words. We all do. But it's a lot. News Now says, the judge I don't like as much as Alito or Cahill. Yeah, he's a little bit rough, no question. Thunder 7 says, will the criminal history of the victims be allowed into court? They were truly the scum of the earth, with one of them being charged with underage sex crimes, the others domestic abuse, reckless use of a handgun, attempted strangulation. To me, it's important for the jury to understand the criminals who attacked Kyle to get his gun and shoot him, but legally. Can the defense bring their rap sheets in? So it's a good question. You know, I don't know the answer to that just yet, but it is something that is being contemplated by both sides. What the prosecution is trying to do, allegedly, I listened today, they have some other indications of, you know, Kyle, I think, got into a fight on a lake at some point in time. There's another, you know, fight or something that Kyle got into at a high school that they want to bring in. So it's sort of like that game that's being played. If they're going to bring in the victims' criminal rap sheets, they're going to try to bring in anything that puts Kyle Rittenhouse in a bad light. And so you have this battle of, you know, extraneous evidence being crammed into court to conflate the issues. And both sides are going to do that, which is natural, and you should. But I don't know how the judge is going to rule on this, because I didn't finish the hearing today, but I will finish it tonight. And of course, we're going to know all of that and more before the trial ultimately starts, because they're going to be fleshing out these motions in limine. Sergeant Bob says timestamps on aggression will be a big factor. Totally right. And so if the allegation is Kyle was the initial aggressor, was the time distance in between the two activities, between Kyle's aggression and Rosenbaum's aggression, was that enough to dissipate, or was it to dissipate the one sequence, the causal chain of events, or can we split that up into multiple incidents so that one event was over? Kyle was the aggressor, that ended, and then Rosenbaum was the aggressor and Kyle responded as a separate incident. Or are these all tied into the same series of events? It's going to be interesting. Former LEO says, I viewed a video from earlier in that day. Rittenhouse was threatened with physical injury by Rosenbaum, had to be physically removed from the interaction with Rittenhouse by bystanders. Did you see that? I did see that. I think that was, you're talking about Rosenbaum. I think the bald guy in the red shirt was very aggressive that whole night and was having a lot of conversations with people. Bowie John Dolero says, do you feel like the prosecutor was kind of slimy? I sure did. I enjoyed watching the judge spank him. No homo. That's from Bowie Jandolero. I did see that. I don't like Thomas Binger. I don't think that he's a up and up, prosecutor. I've watched a lot of his. And it's not to make it personal, right? But what I have seen out of him as a prosecutor, I don't know the man from anybody, but he is that type of prosecutor that will take a case, and it's going to be the most important case, and he doesn't even think about it. It's just on his desk now, and he's going to do everything he possibly can to get that conviction. And I've watched his language in a number of these different court proceedings where he gets out there and he's a little bit too aggressive for my liking. He says stuff like, well, Judge, the victims are all here, and the victims got this, and and the judge scolded him on that. Said, "Hey, don't call them victims because they have not been adjudicated as victims yet. This is a self-defense case. They may be the assailants. Kyle Rittenhouse may be the person who is ultimately victimized if we find that there was in fact self-defense here." And so, a prosecutor that does that, I think, sort of crossing certain lines. It's it's not, an ethical violation or anything like that. It's a stylistic problem. It's a stylistic way of handling things, and I just don't appreciate working with people like that. That's all. Just like they wouldn't appreciate a defense attorney who came in there and started, being overly and unnecessarily aggressive over certain things. I just get that sense from the guy. But again, I'm a defense lawyer, okay? I'm sure he doesn't like defense lawyers either. So it's probably mutual. So I'll rest fine tonight. Let's see what else we've got. A couple others before we jump into our last segment. Jenny Tall says, a little off topic, but do you think the Mohamed Noor resentence of 57 months was the right move? This was a case also out of Minnesota. This was sort of the companion case to some degree to the Derek Chauvin case. And Mohamed Noor was another police officer who I think got a massive sentence and was convicted. This case went up on appeal, and I don't remember what the basis of the appeal was, Jenny, so I can't comment too intelligently on this, but I do know the framework was that I think the Supreme Court came out and dramatically reduced his sentence down to 57 months, which is obviously, a lot better than whatever it was. So people are speculating that the same court might come back and modify Chauvin's move. In other words, Noor might carry over into Chauvin, and Chauvin might see a reduced sentence later down the line. Do I think it was the right move? I haven't read the Court of Appeals or the Supreme Court opinion. I just saw the headline, Jenny Talls, so I'm not sure what the basis was, but it was a similar type of situation. Police officer used too much force, killed somebody, got convicted, went up on appeal, coming back down, and so I'd have to dive into it a little bit further, but it's going to be good for Chauvin, I'd say. Former LEO says this trial is starting to look like illegal lynching. If you can't use the facts, just use emotions. Kind of seeing a lot of that trending around the country. John Halgren says Brandon on the jury. Bad year for Brandons. It is a rough year. Yeah, there was that one year that it was really, really hard to be a Monica. Remember that? Now it's Brandon. Yeah, so The Last Villain says, at least the judge stopped the prosecutor for continuing the BS statements. It was just arson. One of the nonviolent crimes they won't be prosecuting anymore. Da wouldn't brought it past go. The earth changes, I think, not the sun. Oh! So the spinning disk of the earth moves since it's flat, right? So we've got that now. That's good to know. All right. We have Monster One says, wouldn't want people knowing the truth. Gotta block Rob's YouTube videos. Yeah, well, I think, to be fair to YouTube, I think that it's just live streams. Like live streams just don't get engagement. It's for live. It's for being live. If you're live, then it's great. YouTube's happy about it. But as soon as you're not live anymore, it's dead. That content is dead, and it just goes into the archives essentially. So we don't want that, right? We want people to find the show and come back and be able to sort of, scroll into the segments they want to see. So we're just changing some stuff. Monster One says, come on, man. I just wanted to sniff Rittenhouse's hair. Was that Monster One or was that Joe Biden? News Now Wyoming says, I uploaded the warrant for your perusal. Whoa. How did you get that? I was looking for that today. Let's see what we've got here because we're going into Baldwin next. Let's see. Oh, he did get it. Oh, this is great. Thanks, News Now. Oh, man, that's amazing. So we'll be able to look at that. Okay, that's great. We'll save that for the next segment. Monster One says, last one was from Joe Biden. That's what I thought. I figured it was. I knew it. You didn't even have to tell me. I already knew it. Be Brave says, Barnes said the D is considering using input from outside defense attorneys as the trial progresses, but no decision made yet. I think it's uncharted territory. How would that play as attorney-client relationship? Well, I don't know. I mean, I think if you had a formal engagement letter and you were actually acting as an attorney, that the attorney-client relationship should be extended as long as you're a licensed lawyer. I don't think that there would be any problem with that. Now as a practical matter, as a lawyer, right, you may want to be careful about how many people you bring into, how many cooks are in the kitchen, in other words. So, but I like the idea of sort of outsourcing or at least crowdsourcing some data about the trial. I'll be watching it. If I have anything that I can add that's useful, I'll happily do it, right? I'll tweet about it or funnel it onto Barnes or whomever. But yeah, I think, trial is a weird thing as a lawyer. You almost get tunnel vision to some degree, and sometimes you can't see certain things that other people can see because you're so focused on this one issue. I want to get him to say this. This is my argument. This is critical. And he says something that you just, ding, it just kind of bounces off. But other people watching might be able to say, get him on that, get him on that. So we'll see. But yeah, it's going to be interesting. A lot of eyeballs are going to be on this case. Former LEO says felony murder was bounced. I thought felony murder charge was for just piling on. This isn't felony murder in California, is what former LEO says. And our last one on this segment is I'm Not Gas says, wow, news now coming in clutch with a warrant. Give this man an extra internet point for sure, because I couldn't find it. I was looking around this morning and I couldn't find it. So that's amazing. Thank you for that. Those were amazing questions. And thank you for all of your support from our great community over at watchingthewatchers.locals.com. Okay. And speaking of the Alec Baldwin stuff, we're going to jump right into that final segment of the day. Let's see where we're at on this. Oh, it's going to be a longer show. I had a feeling. A lot of good stuff to talk about, though, today. Don't always get that. Sometimes we come on here and it's like supply chain problems. It's like, oh, I know it's a huge problem and I get really angry about it, but can only talk about shipping containers so much. Okay, so let's get into our final segment. More information coming out about the Alec Baldwin shooting and the warrant from the scene of the Rust film is now available. Somebody on our amazing locals community, News Now Wyoming, also on YouTube, sent over a copy of that warrant. So we're going to take a look at a lot of different things today about this shooting. And I want to show you the board. This is what we're looking at now. We recall that we have Alec Baldwin. He is the shooter, the person who actually pulled the trigger. Now, he shot and killed this woman, Halna Hutchins. She was the cinematographer on the scene of Rust. And so she is no longer with us, unfortunately. May she rest in peace. We also have the bullet went through her and hit the director of the film, this fellow, Joel Souza. He's the director of Rust. Rust, of course, is no longer in production because there was a death, and it's a tragic catastrophe. But a lot of people now are starting to theorize about how this happened, put the pieces back together again to identify what went wrong so that it doesn't happen again in the future. And the first thing that we're seeing is a little bit of the blame game happening. Alec Baldwin is now pointing fingers back towards other people who were involved in the production of the film. Specifically, we're going to hear from a couple people today. Number one, we're going to check in with this person. This is Hannah Gutierrez Reed. She is the armorer on the set. She's 24 years old. My understanding is this was her second film, and so interesting that she would be in charge of that. We're also going to hear from this fellow, or hear about this fellow. Neither one of these people are speaking, to my knowledge, but nor should they, since they're presumably involved in criminal investigations in the state of New Mexico. But we also have Dave Halls. He is the assistant director. We're going to learn a little bit more about him as well. We are going to take a look at the actual warrant, since that just came in hot, literally, in the last segment, which I'm excited about. But before we get into all of that, let's listen in on the 911 call, because we're trying to piece together if there's anybody else who could be involved in this. Remember, we're talking about, multiple people, multiple systems, multiple checks and balances. We're supposed to have a sequence and people who are in charge of guns so this stuff doesn't happen. And so when we're talking about criminality, right, how can you necessarily blame Alec Baldwin if he's not responsible for the gun at all? How can you blame him if somebody says to him, this is a clean and a cold gun and it's perfectly ready to use, and he uses it and it's not okay, right? Some people might take a look at that and say, well, it's not his fault. Somebody who is smarter than him, somebody who's an armorer, somebody who's an assistant director, somebody whose job it is to check that gun told him it was good. He's just an innocent person who pulled the trigger. Okay? Other people who have some training in guns knows that you don't ever trust anybody with a gun. You always check it for yourself, and you don't point it at anybody unless you intend to kill them. Kind of one of the first rules they teach you. I think I learned that when I was like 5 years old. So it's one of those things, right? You're going to see a split of opinions on this. You're going to hear people that say Alec Baldwin's a totally innocent person. You're going to hear other people that say, it's always up to the person firing a gun to make sure that it's clean, especially if it's a real gun and not just a prop gun. So we're going to see a split of opinion here, but I'm seeing a lot of the finger pointing start automatically, as it should in a criminal case, right? Nobody wants to go to prison for killing somebody or for criminal negligence. And so Baldwin and co. are starting to point their fingers around other people who were part of the Rust production team. And we're going to see the police are going to be investigating all of the different elements of the production. We're going to start off by listening in on the 911 call. So this is about 3 minutes. I broke it up into 3 separate clips, and we're going to be able to walk through it to some degree to get a first reaction of what happened on the scene of filming. First clip, this is one woman, I don't have identified, who is calling into 911 immediately after the shooting. Here you can listen in.
Santa Fe Fire and EMS, what's the location of the emergency?
Bonanza Creek Ranch has had 2 people accidentally shot on a movie set by a prop gun. We need help immediately.
Okay.
Bonanza Creek Ranch, come on.
Stay on the phone with me. We're going to get some help, okay? Don't hang up, okay? Hold on just 1 second.
It sounds like somebody else is calling for 2 ambulances. You better make good. Everybody should be. We need some help. Our director and our camerawoman has been shot.
Okay, so several people shot. I think that's the end of that clip. Several people shot. You can sort of just hear the very beginning of that, and it sounds like pandemonium, right? She sort of ran out of the building. 911 caller asks her specifically, says, was it loaded with a real bullet, or what the heck happened here? Here's what she says.
So was it loaded with a real bullet or one?
I cannot tell you that.
Okay.
We have 2 injuries from a movie gun shot.
Okay, we're getting them out there already. Just stay on the phone with me. Okay.
Okay. No. I'm a script supervisor.
How many people are injured?
2 that I know of. We were rehearsing, and it went off, and I ran out. We all ran out. They were doubled over, the AD and the camera woman and the director. They're clearing the road for you to come back. We're back in the town. We're back in the western town.
Is there any serious bleeding?
I don't know. I ran out of the building.
Okay, so a couple things there. Ran out of the building, right? Gun goes off. Sounds like they weren't like expecting that. Like the guns shot, they weren't, nobody was anticipating a big boom. If they were, you'd imagine that nobody would be running out of the building. Okay, well, loud noise. Okay, scared me a little bit. But a gun went off and everybody just scattered. Like there's a shooting, there's a shooter, what's happening. So total pandemonium. Also hear from her that we were rehearsing, right? So some people asking, were they recording? Was this during a live shot, right? Don't see any of that from the 911 call. Just hear they were rehearsing. A couple people keeled over. Didn't even see any additional, injuries or anything like that. Literally just ran out of the building. So she hands the phone over to somebody else who hops on 911, and we don't get much more information out of him either. But just for context, here is what he said. So 911 caller passes the phone over to someone else. Here's what he says.
Hello?
Hi, I have a protocol of questions I need to ask. If you can just answer them the best you can, okay? Are they completely alert?
Yeah, they are alert.
Okay. What part of the body was injured?
Yeah, okay. I'm not sure. I'm not in there.
Okay, that's fine. Is there more than one wound?
I think there's one on 2 individuals.
1 wound on 2 individuals? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm sending the ambulance help you now. Stand line. I'll see exactly what to do next, okay?
Okay.
I'm going to tell you how to stop the bleeding. Listen carefully. Make sure we do it right.
We do have a medic on set.
A medic on set? They're already doing that?
I believe so, yeah.
Is the bleeding controlled?
Let me see if I'm allowed to get it close as needed. No.
Okay, so it just kind of fades out, right? The rest of it's there. Everybody called 911. Number of ambulances are skidding on in there, and so it kind of just, peters out there. Now, we have a little bit of a last-minute change. Let me see how I can organize this. So NPR telling us that Alec Baldwin was practicing for a scene when the gun went off. Affidavits now show. So we're actually going to go through it because News Now Wyoming sent that over to us. But it says Alec Baldwin was practicing on a stunt when a prop gun he was holding was fired, killed 42-year-old cinematographer Helena Hutchins, injured director Joel Sosa. I already talked about all that. New affidavits for search warrants were released by Santa Fe County Sheriff's Office. New documents are based on interviews between sheriff detectives, and several members of the film crew offer the most complete accounting so far of Thursday's shooting in New Mexico. So we have the documents. I was going to just read through this puppy, but literally before we started this segment, our good friend News Now Wyoming, who has a channel over on YouTube, so please go check him out, sent us the actual search warrant, which I was not able to find earlier. So this is great. All right, so let's go through it. Not going to be in PowerPoint, so you won't see any of the slide or the red lines, but here's what we've got. State of New Mexico plaintiff in the search matter regard fixed wooden structure facing northbound. So that's the Rust location search warrant, proof of the affidavit. Give us access to all this stuff. Okay, let's see what the affidavit says. So they give us a residence, which is, the fixed structure out there in New Mexico. The person drafting this is a full-time certified peace officer in the state of New Mexico. So what do they want? They want photographs of the structure. They want video cameras, anything, videotapes, anything that was recording. So DVRs, DVDs, all that stuff. All the computer drives, computer hardware, routers, mouse, keyboards, anything, PSP players, floppy disks, SD cards, all firearms, all components, ammunition, all that, digital cameras, clothing, a scan of the scene, which measures the room by laser, prints on everything, fingerprints, palms, bodily fluids, including blood, which is very interesting. So this is just for a search of the premises, but I wanted to see if they were going to be taking Alec Baldwin's blood. That's going to be outside the scope of this puppy because this is just for property, but I'd be curious if they got a warrant for anybody's blood. Residue, discharge of firearms, trace evidence, the investigation to be conducted. Let's see. 545 Bonanza Creek Road. We heard that in the 911 call. Gunshot trauma. Advised a male was accidentally shot by a prop gun. It was unknown if a live round had been used. Upon arrival, we have a deputy, Nicholas LaFleur, advised one female had been shot in the chest, one male in the shoulder area. Female was a cinematographer. She was flown to New Mexico, died, sustained a gunshot wound, and the other director survived. Upon arrival, figured out where this was located during the filming of the movie. All right. Assistant director Dave Halls, who we talked about at the start of the segment, grabbed one of three, quote, prop guns that was set up by the armorer, Hannah Gutierrez, talked about her as well, which was on a cart. The cart is a gray rolling table with 2 layers, was left on this side of the structure due to COVID-19 restrictions. Officer learned one of the prop guns was then grabbed by Halls, the assistant director. He took it to the actor, identified as Baldwin, who was inside the structure. As the assistant director, Halls handed the gun to Baldwin. Halls yelled, "Cold gun," indicating the prop gun did not have any live rounds. The prop gun was fired by the actor Alec Baldwin, striking the cinematographer, Hutchins, and Joel, who was behind her. Later learned, the officer says that Halls did not know live rounds were in the prop gun when he had given the prop gun to actor Alec Baldwin. Okay, well, whose responsibility is it to check for that? Affiant learned what had happened to the prop gun once it was fired. It was handled by armorer Hannah Gutierrez, given to assistant director Dave Halls. Armorer Hannah Gutierrez was given the prop gun after it was fired by Alec actor Baldwin. She then took out the spent casing of the prop gun. When the deputies arrived on the scene, the prop gun was handed to arriving deputies by the armorer. All right, so after it was fired, then it goes back to Hannah, and she takes out the spent casing. Okay, Affiant later learned that actor Alec Baldwin was wearing old Western-style clothing, changed into street clothes prior to leaving the scene, and those items were turned over to the sheriff's office. That's an interesting thing to note. He was wearing old Western-style clothing, changed into street clothes. Interesting, right? And so the reason, I don't know how actors are, but if you want to be like a drunken, person, do you actually drink alcohol? Do you actually use drugs if you want to get into character on set? I don't know. And so you might change out of your clothes so that you get rid of some of that smell or the evidence. I don't know. I'm just speculating, right? That's what I would be looking into if I were a police officer. Not saying that Alec Baldwin was drunk or anything, but that's what they're looking for. These clothes appeared to have blood stains. Santa Fe Sheriff's Office learned the Western-style coat was left inside the structure, reporting that any trace evidence, residue, biological specimens that might be related to the incident are categorized, which, of course, this is why they need this warrant. The incident occurred in close proximity, which led to a transfer of evidence. So they were pretty close by. Some of the blood spatter went onto Alec Baldwin's clothes. Affiant was informed the prop gun was properly secured in a marked patrol unit, along with other prop ammunition. Gray is a cart, 2-tier cart, contained Western-style belt and additional prop ammunition was secured by responding deputies. Hutchins sustained a gunshot wound, died. Joel, visible injury. He was given the opportunity to give a statement. He stated work started at 6:30 a.m. that day. He went on to say the crew usually meets and has breakfast on the property. During the morning hours, the day started off late due to a camera crew that had quit. They had to find another camera crew to help film the movie. Bad morning. Joel said once they hired another camera crew to assist, the day was taking longer than usual because they had one camera to do the filming. Joel was asked about the employees' behavior, said everyone was getting along. There were no altercations that took place. Maybe no altercation, but that doesn't sound like, an ideal environment, really. Joel stated that because of his job, he was more concentrated on the monitors of the cameras, did state that no film was being recorded because the crew was working on getting the scene ready for the movie and how they were going to set up the one camera that was available. Joel said he was standing behind Hutchinson viewing the camera. The rehearsal took place inside the church building where actor Baldwin was sitting on a wooden pew facing south toward the camera and the crew. Joel said the rehearsal entailed actor Alec Baldwin cross-drawing his weapon and pointing the revolver toward the camera lens. According to Joel, it was his belief the gun being used in the rehearsal was safe and used the term cold gun when explaining it. He remembered the phrase cold gun being said while preparing for the scene. Joel explained what he knows about firearms. He said what he knows is 3 people had been handling it or for the scenes. He said firearms are checked by Hannah, who is the armorer, and the firearm is checked by the assistant director, Dave Halls, who then gives it to the actor using the firearm. Joel said as far as he knows, no one gets checked for live ammunition on their person before or after the scenes. The only thing checked are the firearms to avoid live ammunition being in them. Joel stated there should never be live rounds whatsoever near or around the scene. Well, there were. Let's see what else. Joel explained prior to the discharge, they had been working on preparing for a scene before lunch. They broke for lunch around 12:30, had to be shuffled to an area from the set to have breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Joel said that they returned back after lunch, although he's not sure if the firearm was checked again. Joel stated that they had Alex sitting in a pew in a church building in the setting. He was practicing a cross draw. Joel said he was looking over his shoulder of Helena. He heard something that sounded like a whip, then a loud pop. Joel remembers Helena complaining about her stomach, grabbing her midsection. Joel also said she stumbled backward, assisted to the ground, bleeding. He was bleeding from his shoulder. Once I completed my interview, I made contact with Reed Russell, another cameraman. While speaking to Reed, he said he arrived early that day. Camera crew was having issues. Reed said he was working with the camera in the setting for the movie. They stepped out for 5 minutes from lunch. They returned back onto the setting of the scene. Alec, Joel, and Helena were already in possession of the firearm. Okay. He was not sure if the firearm had been checked due to the absence of the 5 minutes. Oof, there you go. Reed stepped out for 5 minutes before returning from lunch. When he got back, Alec, Joel, and Helena all already had it. Reed went on to say that while setting up the camera, there was no video or audio being filmed. They were preparing for the scene. While preparing, there was a shadow coming from outside. They tried to move the camera. He said Alec was trying to explain how he's going to draw out the firearm, where his arm would be, where the firearm was pulled from the holster. Reed was not sure why the firearm was discharged, just remembered the loud bang. He remembers blood on the person, injury. He was asked about Alec and how he handled the firearm. He said he had been very careful, brought up an instance where the scene was being filmed earlier. Reed said Alec had made sure it was safe and that a child wasn't near him when they were discharging a firearm during that scene. Detectives executed a search warrant. They did find blood in the area. They found an incident. Okay. A find is aware that additional evidence might be located on the prop gun used while filming of the movie. Would like to confirm the incident took place or that it wasn't recorded. That's why they want to go and take access, get information about all the cameras and surveillance. Training and experience. Let's see. Unknown if there are any additional weapons in there. All right, there it is. Signed off on by Detective somebody, Joel Cano, out of the Santa Fe Sheriff's Office. So that is the full warrant. Some interesting stuff in there. We have a 5-minute gap of time. We have... Very interesting. Okay, so thank you to News Now Wyoming for sending that over to us. Very interesting, interesting stuff there. Now, I want to see what else we were going to cover. Yeah, and so we just covered a lot of that. Now, here's a scene. The New York Post gave us some background on this gal. This is Armorer Hannah Gutierrez Reed. So we heard from the search warrant that this was either Alec Baldwin got handed the gun by this woman, Hannah Gutierrez Reed, or through David Hall. So it went from Anna to David into Alec's hand, and That's all we got. Like, we don't know who checked what at that moment in time. So the New York Post calls her a rookie armorer. She's 24-year-old former model. She told the Voices of the West podcast about landing the, quote, pretty sweet gig as the first armorer. She said on that podcast, quote, I think the best part about my job is just showing people who are normally kind of freaked out by guns how safe they can be and how they're not really problematic unless put in the wrong hands. Oh, no. Whose hands? Like Alec Baldwin's hands? Oh, no, that's terrible. She said her dad, a well-known Hollywood armorer, Theo Reed, gave her some direction, but she, quote, figured out most of the job requirements, quote, on my own. Oh, no. That poor girl. That is a horrible way to be written about in a news article, isn't it? She gave a podcast. Yeah, it's a pretty sweet gig. How did you learn to be an armorer at 24? You used to be a model. Well, my dad is also an armorer. He taught me a couple things, and I just figured out the rest of it on my own. Yikes. Okay, so that's no good. Here's another image. She told the podcast how she learned by herself to make sure the dummy rounds were in the right spot of any weapons being used. Said, quote, you have to, like, look at the front of it and determine which one is the blank if it's dummied up. That's how I tell, at least. Oh, it's terrible. Reed also called how she had previously been a model, but then wanted to be either an actress or a director of photography, the position held by Helena Hutchins when she was shot dead by Baldwin last Thursday. Well, I mean, it looks like, I don't know if that's a real gun or not, but it looks like she's got a little trigger discipline going on over there. How about this one? Yeah, I got some trigger discipline going on here. That's good. It's good. At least she's got that going for her. So, yeah, so you can see how these things can kind of just compound, right? It's not good. So you've got Alec Baldwin. You've got also this guy. The assistant director was also the subject of a number of other complaints. This is David Halls. He was fired from previous movie after a gun incident injured a crew member. What? Yeah, CNN says that he, the same guy who handed a prop gun to Alec, was serving as the assistant director on a film called Freedom's Path in 2019 when a gun, quote, unexpectedly discharged on set, causing a sound crew member to recoil from the blast, halting the production. Crew member saw a medic. It was all good, but Halls was removed from the set and then fired from production. The production company said Halls was removed from the set immediately after the prop gun discharged. Production did not resume until he was off the site. So they just threw him right out of it. And we had another quote here from another person named Maggie Gall. She's a local prop maker. She says that back in 2019, in another movie that Hulu created called Into the Dark, says that Halls neglected to hold safety meetings and consistently failed to announce the presence of a firearm on set, as is protocol. Goal said the only reason the crew was made aware of the weapon's presence was because the assistant prop master demanded Dave acknowledge and announce the situation each day. So you've got just a series of bad potential individuals, not necessarily, actively malicious or criminal, but you have a 24-year-old armorist. You have David Halls, who looks like he's had problems with guns in 2 other movies. And you two work together. You're in charge of the firearms here. Not ideal. Okay, let's see what you have to say about the Alec Baldwin story. And one final shout out to News Now Wyoming for the clutch delivery of the warrant at the last minute. Amazing. So go check out his channel. Let's see what you have over here from watchingthewatchers.locals.com. We've got our first question is from Sergeant Bob. Says, I bet the armorer never took an NRA weapons safety course. Her training resume? Well, she used to be a model, and her dad is also an armorer. So I think that's all you need in America these days. I'm Not Gas says, I'm extremely biased against Baldwin based on his politics and personality, but I will say I don't think he is 100% responsible. Though he should bear some responsibility since he ultimately pulled the trigger. Realistically, if this was an accident, we are dealing with multiple layers of criminal negligence. But Baldwin is rich, connected, and famous. The worst that will happen to him, he's going to cry on TV and write a book. Yeah, that's why we're talking about this story, right? Because he is in a different category of people. He is in the rich and famous and the elite, and they operate under a different system of justice. I wish it wasn't true, but if this happened to anybody else, they'd probably already be in jail with a $2 million bond, right? It's a different system. But I agree with you, I'm not gassed. I don't agree with Alec Baldwin either, and there are a lot of people that are sort of, rubbing his nose in this, which we've done a little bit of that. I acknowledge a little bit of it, but really, right, this is a tragedy. This is a horrific thing. It's not, in my opinion, particularly interesting content to just, rub people's noses in it day after day after day. He is an anti-gun person. He's somebody who has been very aggressive against his political enemies. But is he a murderer? I don't know. It's to be seen, right? So we don't want to jump the gun on that. We have Sergeant Bob says that safety protocol always must be followed. Several years ago, Oregon State Police bomb tech responded to a bomb at a bank. There had been 2 or 3 bomb incidents earlier that morning, which had been phonies. He took shortcuts, did not follow protocol. This time it was real. He paid with his life. Oh man, that's a terrible story, Sergeant Bob. But a valuable lesson in there. Did that light get brighter back there? I think it did. Why did that happen? Yeah, it did get brighter. What's going on with that? All right, so that's now adjusted. Thank you for that, Sergeant Bob. I think that you're absolutely right. Protocols are there for a reason. Can't skimp just because it's the same thing that you're used to. Former LEO says, at one time I was involved in a video that showed a head in view down a barrel of a live round being fired. We set up a mirror at 45-degree angle and positioned the camera about 20 feet away from the mirror. Easy. Seems like everybody dropped the ball. Incompetence kills. I see what you're saying. Yes. So you don't look down the barrel of a gun is what you're saying. And she said that she did, in other words. Former LEO says, I hope they did a blood draw on Baldwin. I hope so too. I really do. I think that they would for anybody else. If that was your son or daughter out there that accidentally shot somebody, blood draw immediately. I'd like to know if Alec Baldwin got one. Thunder7 says, there are so many coincidences that it's beyond belief. I'll talk just about 2 of them. The woman shot and killed grew up in Murmansk, Russia, where they keep nuclear subs. Baldwin starred in a movie, Hunt for Red October, where he was searching for a Russian nuclear sub that docked in Murmansk, Russia. Second one was the fact that the man who handed the prop gun to Baldwin also worked on the movie with Brandon Lee, who was accidentally shot and killed with a blank while filming The Crow in the 80s. My radar tells me there's a lot more to this story. Whether we will ever know the truth is not known. Whoa, what a comment from Thunder7. Those are very interesting coincidences, isn't it? What's happening here? Is this like a secret satanic cult ritual? I don't know. Hollywood has some sinister stuff, don't they? Thank you for that. 3 Girlie says, Hannah Gutierrez Reed, the armorer, was probably hired at low budget on her dad's name. Her dad is a well-known Hollywood armorer called Thel Reed. She was way out of her depth, but was responsible for the weapons and ammunition. And maybe the death of another person as a result of her incompetence. We have No Name says, of course, the fake news is blaming Trump, claiming it's possible that a MAGA supporter put a real bullet in the gun to frame Baldwin for parodying Trump in the SNL skits. Are you kidding? Never mind that the woman he killed was beginning a documentary on pedophilia in Hollywood. Whoa! What? Okay, this is getting weird. This story's getting weird now. She was going to create a documentary on pedophilia in Hollywood, and Alec Baldwin took her out? I like where this is going. Nadarb says, are they filming this movie with cameras and equipment from the era in which the movie is set? Because for a Hollywood-style film, one would think all of this on film for them to see, open and shut case. You would think so, but they didn't have a camera crew. Isn't that convenient? They all walked off. Stephen Crowder says, Alec Baldwin has strangled at least 2 hookers. Changed my mind. Hey, Steven's on the show. He's a big name. That's pretty cool. Shout out to Steven. Monster says, where did the live ammo come from? Seems like intentionally done sabotage. So there's other stories out there that these people actually were. So it wasn't, I think it was a prop gun, but a real gun. And so they actually went out and had other problems with this gun. They were shooting it previously. So I think they actually had real ammo there. And the 24-year-old armorist who looks down the barrel of a gun, no, I think it's good. I think it's good. Yeah, we good. She just checks the top of the guns of the bullets. She just takes a look. Oh no. We're good on that. It's dummied up, whatever she means. I'm Not Gas says, one thing I don't understand, I show a live round even got in the chamber. I thought prop guns were modified to not be able to chamber full-length live rounds. I don't think it was a prop gun. I think it was actually a real gun that was a prop in a movie. But it wasn't an actual prop gun that doesn't function as a gun. It was a real gun being used as a prop. Monster One says, Baldwin said people are not responsible enough to own guns. He was just proving himself right. Yeah. Some of these have to stick, no question. Former LEO says, did they get a warrant for the records from the place they eat lunch and how much alcohol was or was not consumed during the lunch? I didn't see that, former LEO, but I would love to see those other search warrants if anybody got a blood draw warrant. Monster One says her career is over now. It's probably over. Yeah, she's probably Gutierrez, probably not going to be an armorist on any other films. But she's young. You never know what happens in 20 years. News Now Wyoming says, you're welcome for the link. I found it this morning. Then during your intro, you said you couldn't get a hold of it. I figured it'd be good for the show, and your analysis is obviously smarter than mine. Well, I don't know about that, News Now Wyoming. That's being a little bit presumptuous here. I think that, we can both read through a PDF. I'd encourage people to go, if you're going to make a video about that, I'd encourage you to do that. News Now Wyoming is on YouTube. Check him out. And thank you for the link. I couldn't find it anywhere, which is frustrating for me. Beto O'Rourke says, I'm coming for prop guns next, which is a good point. And probably children's guns too. The ones with the little red dots to make sure that it looks fake. Those are probably dangerous. I'm Not Gas says, so call me out for being a misogynist if you like, but I have a sneaking suspicion this Gutierrez lady was given a job above her standing based upon something that's not, skills and experience from I'm Not Gas, implying, some female privilege. Former LEO says, 24 years old, and this is the case of political correctness of qualifications. Monster One says, she was probably a diversity hire. Does she have any experience? No, don't be sexist. Sorry. Hand of Nod says, it's a hot mess. Complacency kills every day. The only answer is the weapon is hot. Must do your own brass check when exchanging weapons. It seems there were a lot of problems that were preventable. Semper Vigilans. Hand of Nod signs off on that. You got to check it, right? It's the first thing they teach you. You always check it. You never trust anybody because they don't know. News Now Wyoming says, personally, I don't see any criminal liability to Baldwin. If it is common on a movie set for two people to verify the weapon is unloaded, it would be hard to prove that he didn't actually have a good expectation for two people to do their job. Common trading, of course, he was wrong, but negligent? The other two, I can see easy case for negligence, civil liability. Her family is going to make a lot of money. Yeah, especially if there was, massive blanket insurance policies and things like that. Be Brave says, this whole thing is insane. My gut instinct says Hall needs to be checked out further. I think that's good instincts, Be Brave. Between the two of those guys, guy and gal, looked like there was a lot of incompetence mashed into one very important chain, which is the weapons chain. Not good. Speech Unleashed says, there was a judge that used to say the cheap comes out expensive. Sounds like they were operating on a thin budget. We're looking to save money by not hiring professionals. I know the union came out about the fact that they were not hired to handle the gun management on the movie. Yeah, the union is absolutely dunking here for sure. They're saying, well, they weren't with our union. They didn't work for us. So that's what you get for hiring amateurs. They released several statements to that effect. Having fun with it. Three Girlies says, so what's the likelihood that Hannah Gutierrez Reed will be taking the full fall for this when Halls is just as culpable? Really don't see anything coming to Baldwin. He should be arrested for hiring substandard people for his film, which is really the negligence on his part. Yeah, it'd be very curious to see, if there was a standard operating procedure that they were supposed to follow and they didn't. You could probably analyze some of this to like a like a police shooting to some degree with different standards of care, but you have safety protocols that you follow. If you don't follow those things, maybe they charge you with a crime like they did with Derek Chauvin. Some analogies there, not exactly because cops kind of have a higher duty, more training, but you can see the analogy. You've got rules of engagement. You've got rules and protocols that you're supposed to do. If somebody dies as a result of you failing to properly adhere to your protocols, well, that might be criminal negligence to some degree. Smart Alec Baldwin says, I thought safety protocol means double masking and being double vaccinated. That's all we've been talking about for 2 years. Oh, guns are dangerous too? But Fauci's not talking about those yet. CDC is, though. Rochelle Walensky. We have Speech Unleashed says, I'm wondering how easy it is to tell the difference between a blank and a live bullet. Would someone be able to tell the difference just by looking at the bullet in the gun? So on an actual bullet, you have the head of the bullet, right? It looks like a piece of, you can see it in there. And I'm not sure what she was saying, what she was looking at. Like if that's removed, she said it was dummied up. So maybe there's a, something that I don't know. I don't know what she's talking about, but if you look at a bullet, you can see the brass, or you can see the head of the bullet literally visually right there. Jeremy Matrita says, Rob, something interesting about Hutchins. Hutchins supported the International Alliance of Theatrical Stage Employees, IATSE, the labor union that represents Hollywood's crew and technical workers, and planned to strike over dangerous working conditions days before her death. Speculating. Are you saying she was taken out by Alec Baldwin? The Last Villain says, I don't think the prop person handed the gun to him. Did I miss that part? So several people said that they heard him say cold gun, right? So the way I think about that is he's got it and he's going cold gun and handing it to Alec Baldwin is sort of how I'm visualizing that happened, but I could be wrong. Vientikis says, given that the shooting happened during a rehearsal and not during actual filming, I put the responsibility totally on Baldwin. On the other hand, I'm always cautious to go hardcore on punishments for situations like this. Our legal system is too punishment happy for the regular people for my taste. Accidents do happen, but people also take advantage of the fact that accidents happen. Is that enough nihilism for you? Yeah, I think that's fair, Vientikis, right? I mean, I agree. I don't think that you should just automatically throw people in prison. Even Alec Baldwin, he should go through due process. I just want to see. I'm just curious if the same standard investigation that would apply to anybody else is also going to apply to him. We'll see. I have my doubts about it, but we'll see. I hope so. Right? I hope the justice system is blind, but I know that it's not. Jay, he says, as tragic as this is, hopefully this will bring about change to the movie industry so this never happens again. There's something true about that, right? It's called anti-fragility. It's the idea that if something bad happens, everything gets stronger as a result of it, right? You have something that is fragile. You have the opposite of fragile, which is robust. So you can have a teacup on a desk. That's pretty fragile. You can have something robust like a safe or a computer, a diamond that is very strong. And you have something that's the opposite of fragile. It's called anti-fragile. It actually grows from disorder. In this case, movie sets are going to grow in their safety as a result of this death. Same thing happens with airplanes, right? Every airplane that crashes, terrible for everybody on board that airplane. But as a whole, the entire air structure, the entire industry gets a little bit stronger because they lost something and they respond and they become more anti-fragile as a result of that. So I think, Jay Heath, you're right. There will be some changes that ultimately save lives. It's a tragedy that this happened, but it won't be entirely in vain. Three Girlie says the gun was real because it was a period piece. That means it was a revolver. She should not have had to look down the barrel of a gun, but the live ammunition should never have been anywhere near the blanks for her to try and figure that out. Yeah, I agree with that. Right? And the gun should never, ever, I would imagine, be used in real live fire. You just sort of get a different gun for that stuff and a different ammo and different places to store all of that. Would be my thought. Perry Masonary says proper training in weapons and handling should be the rule in all movies and using guns. I think that may be common sense, but just saying. Yeah, there's not that much common sense anymore, unfortunately. News Now, Wyoming says, just fact check the deputy director was on the set for The Crow. He was the assistant director for the sequel, but I can't find anything that shows he participated in the original. So just fact. Okay, so that's interesting. News Now, Wyoming. Maybe he was younger and he's just not on IMDb. Who knows? Very interesting stuff now. Squid Game says this would make more sense if it was on our show. You know, I've resisted watching Squid Games. I haven't watched it yet. And I just heard it was really, really violent. And I'm sort of trying to get less of that in my life. We got enough of that here. Former LEO says maybe she didn't know that a revolver fired the round that is next up in the cylinder rotation. A period piece would be a single action because the hammer has to be manually cocked. As that happens, the cylinder rotates and brings up a fresh round. So that's former LEO saying that there was a revolver and maybe she put the blank dummy in one chamber, but actual live rounds in the other 5. Oh my gosh. Or oh no, he's just going to cock it on this one. So it's going to be fine. It's going to be perfectly safe. My dad said so. Maybe that's what she said. Those were great questions. All of those came over from watchingthewatchers.locals.com. Thank you for all your support. Saw we had a new follower over on Twitch. Shout out to Disobedient Civilian. Yesterday we had Boldy Dave and many others over there. So shout out to my friends over there on Twitch. And on Rumble, somebody was asking Elucidation Station, I think, and Sledgehammer the Telescreen. They were asking about that right back there. That, my friends, is the Capitol building. It's a Lego set. So as you can tell, now that has been revealed, the FBI will be breaking my doors down any minute now. A last question came in, says Baldwin took her out because she's a Trump supporter. All right, so that's another good way to end the show. And that, my friends, is it for the show. Let's check out some new supporters who joined up over on Locals. This is last week's new list. I'm gonna update this tonight for the rest of this week. But Damn Girl signed up along with Michael N, Bill Givens, our guy 2, So Flow Red, Maxim 15T with the big join, Sir Darren, Fire Dat, and V-Dub Shanny all joined in this amazing community where we get a lot of these questions and have some really insightful conversations, quite frankly, if I do say so myself. We also had Max922, Tsunami Tommy in the house, Sugar Britches, Ad Meliora, Pretty Darn Nice, Sovereign Lion, Linfish, Germs, and Sniper 275 all over at watchingthewatchers.locals.com, which I'm trying to get a little bit more active on. You're going to see a little bit more of that. Today we had a semi-early morning live stream. It was, I think, about half hour, about 11 a.m., Sometimes in the morning, I knock out a lot of my early meetings, and I need to get started recording. And so I'm going to start by kind of getting warmed up a little bit from time to time over on Locals, and I hope that you don't mind that. So come check it out at watchingthewatchers.locals.com. This weekend, my friend, is it this weekend? Let's check the dates. Is it this weekend? I think it's next weekend. It's not this weekend. It's next weekend. This weekend is Halloween. Oh, we got 2 weeks. I got ahead of myself. I got super excited. But the following weekend, on Saturday, November 6th, 7 to 8 p.m., we have our monthly Locals meetup. It's a lot of fun. We do it all over Zoom. Cameras on, cameras off, whatever you want. Come check it out. If you're a member or supporter over at watchingthewatchers.locals.com, you can join in on it. And before we wrap up out of here, final shout outs to my friends over on Locals. I see Nadarb is over there. I'm Not Gas, Jack Alaya. We've got Mustang Jeff in the house. We have Vienticus Prime. Shout out to News Now Wyoming for giving us that warrant. Love it. Jack Alaya and many others are chatting away. And that, my friends, is it for me for the show for the day. We are going to be back here recording live at 4 p.m. Arizona time. That's 7 p.m. on the East Coast. The show is premiering live on YouTube. I'm sorry, premiering, not live, on YouTube at 7 p.m. Eastern. 7 p.m. Arizona time, 10 p.m. Eastern. My time zones are all screwed up. If you want to be a part of the live show, 4 p.m. Arizona time on Locals, watchingthewatchers.locals.com. And thanks for being a part of the show. I'm going to see everybody right back here, same time, same place tomorrow. Have an amazing evening. Sleep well, my friends. Until tomorrow. Bye-bye.